Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The time is 1 p.m. and we're gathered for the purpose of board member workshop. We're going to have the RSM statement of work and investigation process, which is scheduled for 2 hours. And welcome to Jennifer and Clara. And is Matt on the line? No. Okay. Well, we welcome both of you back this afternoon. Thank you for being with us. Followed by an agenda review for the October 6, 2020 regular meeting. And at this time, I will turn it over to Clara Ewing.
Hi, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Okay, hi. So the SOW, we started circulating a draft early summer. We have had, again, discussions with you all and working with the board attorney. We have made modifications to the SOW to make sure that we incorporate comments and any concerns that you all have had regarding the verbiage that's in here. So we're just here to answer any questions with this updated SOW.
Okay, so board members, does anyone have any questions regarding the statement of work for fiscal year 2021 of our internal audit plan? Mrs. Morgan?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm what you all said about your sort of sidebar today, that you're going to try to do a linkage between the payment process and
Yeah, in the dashboard, that's correct.
Great, thank you. That's all I need to know.
Ms. Morgan. And Ms. Patrica?
So are phone calls included in the estimate for meetings, requests, and research? We're not going to be billed separately for...
I'll give the example of last week and today. This relationship is important to us as well. We are not billing you for those phone calls.
Understood. So in a previous hourly rate contract we had with the board, when I was reviewing their billing, they actually included phone calls in there, and I was able to call up the contract they entered into and give some pushback, and they removed those pieces from the bill. So can we update the SOW to include that specifically?
Well, we kept this in here. Take, for example, we've had school boards call us, can you research X, Y, and Z sales tax for us? That does take some time, and we need to have the ability to be able to do that if we're called upon.
That's research, though. Research is covered in that. That's something that we would...
Oh, so you're saying the phone calls itself? Okay.
Correct. Please, thank you. Also, as I look at the HR audit, I wonder whether we should be looking at whether we have best practices in place regarding hiring racial and ethnic minorities. Is that something you can do? I think I know that when I'm out with groups, they're asking what is the percentage of our employee population as it relates to our student population. Is that the metric we should be looking at, or should we be looking at as compared to the ratio of ethnic and racial minorities as compared to the demographics of the entire community, and whether we have best practices in place to ensure that we're getting the most and best qualified candidates to reflect the racial diversity of our student body. Am I making sense?
That makes sense. We can include because that'd be pretty relevant to show too in the background how you compare. Even if we can see how you compare to other school districts as well, we'll try to pull that information. But whatever we can find from that perspective, we'll try to include that in.
I have a lot of questions about the investigative function, but that's kind of later in this part of the, so I'll wait for now.
All right, fine, and thank you, Ms. Patrica. Board members, Ms. Jordan.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know if we're going over every page, but I mean, my questions are, some of them, I have quite a few. So the understanding of documentation of the process was one. When we're looking at all this, there's nowhere in here where the probation period is even considered in that document. That's page 5. I'm assuming we have a probation period that we need to place here.
So when we developed this scope of work, we were taking it from the recruitment to once they get on. So once they've been onboarded is where we were stopping the process.
So I'm sorry, say that again, please?
So if you go to page 5,
Yes.
we're talking about the recruiting, the selection, and then the onboarding. So we need a start and a stop point for our process. We can expand it.
Well, I guess then, what is the, and I apologize, I can't remember, what was the inherent risk when it came to HR? If we're doing it from the recruiting to when they get here and stop? Because where is that risk factor at that we have in HR?
Well, HR is inherently risky because that is more than half of your budget. So
The payroll portion of it is?
So HR can be broken down into various aspects. We can come in and do an outboarding process, performance reviews. So this is just one aspect of HR that we're coming in, that we suggest that we come in to review. But inherently, HR is risky just inherently because of the volume, and that is the largest part of your budget. So looking at various aspects of that is prudent for an internal audit function.
Right, so that would be the part of, once they're onboarded, then would be the inherent risk, not the before part, right?
It's the before, making sure that you're getting the right people. That's inherently risky if you're not hiring the right people. They're not qualified, et cetera.
And then can I just ask, how many, I know this is off,
Jordan, can you go a little closer to?
sorry? Could you just say, as far as the company is concerned, because I know this is a lot of questions that I've been receiving, so I figure I need to ask this question. How many folks, how many staff are trained in GASP in your office, your particular office? And that was one question that
Okay.
a lot of people are asking me. And then how many Yellow Book audits have you issued in a year?
So we
Your
function.
particular office.
Sorry. So we function as a North Florida team. So Jennifer and I are from an office, Matthew is from a different office. So we function as the North Florida consulting team. So I am Yellow Book. I take my 12 to 24 hours a year. It's 24 every 2 years, but I make sure I get 24 every year. Jennifer, all the leaders make sure that we're getting our Yellow Book requirements. But as far as issuing Yellow Book audits, this is consulting, so we're not doing attest services. We have an attest group where they go in and they do financial statement audits of numerous school districts, and the single audit that goes with it with Yellow Book.
So then you would all be coming from different, none of you are in the same offices, so you would be coming from a different office. Is that a different travel expense if you're coming from?
No, we don't bill you for travel expenses.
Okay. That's it for right now, Mary. Thank you.
Can I piggyback on one of her questions?
Pardon me,
Can I piggyback?
Ms. Jordan, Ms. Patricia wants to piggyback.
So, you asked the question about HR and risk, and I guess the answer I didn't hear was when you conducted your risk assessment of Lee County, I get that HR in an organization of our size is inherently risky, but I didn't hear what specifically about your risk assessment of Lee County Public Schools helped you to identify this specific area of HR as being the number 3 most risky process that we have in Lee County that should be audited third on the list.
Right. So during our discussions that we were having with you all, various leadership, recruitment came up a lot, and being able to timely hire, those kinds of things. So it came up through a lot of the conversations, and we're seeing this inherently throughout numerous school districts, not just you all as well. But yes, it did come up during numerous conversations, and that's what brought it to the top 10 list as well.
Can I?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, because I was going to, thank you. Okay, so it came up, but what did you find here within our own, when you were doing your investigation, because you had come here to do your risk assessment ahead of time, and during that risk assessment, did you see something that, because that's why we have you here, we don't know, so was there something that you found or that you've seen that brought that to that, the top level in HR?
So the risk assessment process, as we went through last year, is very high level, and it's purposely high level. We're not looking at processes, we're not digging deep into processes, walkthroughs, looking at documentation. So it's based on the conversations about risk, what keeps people up at night, what we're seeing in the paper, what we're seeing elsewhere. So we have not investigated, we have not audited anything within Lee County Schools per se right now. But that's why it came to the top 10 on the risk assessment. This is a high-risk process that you all should probably look at, or have your function look at, I should say.
Can I just ask one more question? Can you explain what high, I guess I'm confused because when I hear high level, to me, that's something that you're like taking a deep dive into because it's a high level as opposed to another level. So can you explain what that means, the high level that?
So instead of, we were looking at talking about processes from a 30,000 level foot and not digging deep, 10,000, getting documentation, talking to control owners, talking to process owners. All the discussions were at your level, senior leadership, directors and managers.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Gittens?
Yes, I just wanted to weigh in with that as well, with this conversation, in that if we're looking at an organization that's as large as ours, and tell me if I'm wrong, when you're looking at the highest risk, you would look at where you're spending the most money and say, okay, so is there anything that can be done in this area where we're spending so much money that could possibly be improved on or tweaked? Not that there's something that's wrong, but let's look at where we're spending our money and see if we can do something to make that better. And that's what I see as you guys, as your function. Am I correct or no?
Yeah, and if you recall from the risk assessment, we talk about the risk factors. Financial, public perception, governance. There's a variety of risk factors that we're taking into account when we're looking at this. Anything you guys do is transparent, public perception is huge. This is a huge financial part of your budget. So all those factors were taken into consideration from that perspective as well.
Great. Is that it, Ms. Gittens?
I think so. I mean, I think this whole thing with the whistleblower policy and all of the things that are going along with it are going to help us to be better and to help the public, persona of what we're doing with all the money, and since that's our biggest chunk of our budget. So I just think it's something that's very necessary to do.
Ms. Jordan, did you have something more?
Yeah, I'm still a little, I guess because I look at, this is speaking about onboarding and everything pre-employment, whereas the actual concern or money or anything dealing with the financial situation would be after the fact, and the payroll or anything after versus before. So that's why, and as Ms. Gittens had said, we have to be concerned about the financial. To me, that is like, are we using you for the best possible way in HR?
Can I add one little thing to what I was saying? And yes, it's after the person's hired, but it's also before. We spend money recruiting and looking for employees, and all of that's a part of it. So if we ask them to come in and look at that process and say, is there a way we can do this better? Is there some way we can save money on our recruiting? That's before the person's hired. So that means all of it, from the time when we talk HR, from the time there's the inception of the job description, and is it the right thing to say to get the right person? So it covers the whole gamut.
No, and I get that, and I'm sorry, but does that constitute spending $125,000? So that's my question.
It's all a part of the process, I think, and anyway.
No, thank you.
I think Ms. Giovanelli had her hand up.
Yes, Ms. Giovanelli.
So I'll make sure you can hear me. So no, I understand, because I think it's about efficiency and then transparency. So I appreciate everything you're doing, because it's really for the public to understand and make sure that we understand and the public understands. That's so important, especially for me. So we want to be efficient in our HR processes. And so if they can help us, that will save money. I assure you that the 125 will save money in the long run. So I think that just being efficient and you looking at our processes, and it's always about how we can do better. And the only way to do that is have a different perspective look at something to be able to accomplish that. So thank you.
And maybe I could clarify something, Ms. Jordan, if I could. I think that part of the risk factors that we looked at when we came up with the top 10 list, one of them is process. The other one is control environment. We look at revenue source or materiality, the dollars going through that. We look at compliance, the compliance in nature of the process, the rules, the statutes. Is there change within the function? So we look at a lot of those things, and I think the reason why that kind of bubbled to the top, and not once an employee is hired and moves through the process, because that at that point in time it may be too late. So if you've ever tried to fire an employee, it's very challenging. If you don't get the right person there to begin with, or if you start school and you have vacancies, that puts you in a very bad position, right? You're in the wrong side of the bargaining chip. So the recruiting function, getting the employees, getting the right employees, as well as bringing them on board. We have heard stories about making offers, but it takes 2 to 3 weeks to onboard due to red tape, X, Y, and Z, and you lose that employee. So we have teacher shortage. This is even before pandemic, right? And now we have substitute issues. So that HR team needs to be rocking and rolling to be able to fill the positions appropriately so that the district can operate. And that's where the risk comes in. Does that help?
Well, as having businesses, I definitely understand the purpose of hiring people and making sure you're hiring the right people, and the cost that is related to that, because there is always a cost when you hire people in training alone.
Right.
So I do understand that, and yes, firing as well. So that concept, I mean, I have that. I was just trying to figure out where, all the rest of putting everything else together.
I mean, I think that we could probably sit here and have a really good discussion about what should be next, and everybody might come to a different conclusion. I mean, transportation is so challenging. Procurement and contracting is always high risk. I don't care what district you go to. There's insurance costs that are, rising. But when we did the risk assessment based on, here, where we were, who we were talking to, and the different change factors and staffing and positioning and board member concerns, that's what kind of came up to the top. I'm sure we could do an equally as effective audit on, once they get here, and then that process of how to do the 90 days and the evaluation process and the recontracting, et cetera. But that's the one that bubbled up to the top.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Gittens?
I would just draw everyone's attention to, the fact that their 3 main jobs are waste, fraud, and abuse, and it's on the screen there. C is waste, and it means intentional or unintentional, and I think that word unintentional is paramount, because it's not a gotcha thing. It's a, did you realize, with this extra set of eyes, that if you put this over here, you could save this amount, or you could be more efficient. So it's not, I think some people look at, we're paying this amount and hiring these people to gotcha these departments, and I don't think that's the goal of it. But when you read intentional or unintentional, of consumption, mismanagement, squandering, whatever. But let's just take a look. How can we do better?
Right.
And you're only as good as the improvements that you make.
Yes.
Okay, any other comments? So I just want to mention that one of the things I've noticed with comments from the superintendent and Dr. Pruitt is that we go through this whole process of advertising, recruiting, hiring, and onboarding people, and then we have many of our teachers who do not stay with us for a long period of time. So we probably could make that process more efficient in providing maybe more information to some of those potential employees ahead of time. And because I know that Dr. Atkins, maybe you could weigh in here, but I know that I've heard Dr. Pruitt say that, we spend X amount of money with every new hire that we process. And then if they're not with us for any length of time, we're starting all over again. And I know she said the other day that they're still trying to hire teachers and other employees and constantly playing catch-up. So my interpretation of this documentation of the process and the way that the testing of compliance and internal controls was going to be a way to maybe refine the process that we're using now and identify ways to make that more efficient. But if you could, Dr. Atkins.
Well, I don't know exactly what you're aiming at, but I'll try to speak to the turnover issue. As you know, it's very, very costly for us to deal with turnover. I mean, a conservative estimate is $20,000. If you look at the true estimate in terms of lost instructional time and those, when you are replacing that person with someone who's not as experienced, it goes up from there. I've seen estimates anywhere from $38,000 to $45,000 when you continue to look at cost of training, cost of experience. Florida is another unique animal in that we have a lot of mobility in this state that makes it even more challenging because there's a lot of growth in certain regions, and just keeping up with the growth is a challenge, and then keeping people. And then the last piece, I think that's particular to Lee County, is that where our teachers, by and large, choose to live versus where our student population resides makes it, again, a unique challenge for certain regions of our community, particularly the East Zone. I think that is slowly changing, but it's very, very slow to change. And let me just throw in the last piece. The other thing I think that's rather unique to Lee County is that if you look at as Lee Countyans age, so the older we get, the less diverse we are, the younger we are, the more diverse we are in really all areas. And I think that people look at, well, you should reflect your student population in terms of the way your workforce looks, but it totally divorces from the reality of what Lee County looks like in terms of the availability of workforce, in terms of the age of available workers to serve our students.
Thank you. Board members, any other questions or comments? Mrs. Morgan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask this question earlier. Ms. Lecter, we had a conversation earlier about the difficulty with respect to payments on the contract because it wasn't clear in terms of process. Is that all squared away in your mind?
I still have a little bit of concern when I read the contract. They talk about 3 to 4 phases, phase 1 being 20% of payment, phase 2 being 30%, but they really don't in their contract specify what the phases are for us to identify that they've completed those phases in order to make the payments accordingly. They talk about a month. The first month is 20%, but we really need to be paying on phases completed, not monthly, based on what the work is being done. So I do have a concern about that still.
Thank you.
If I may?
Spoke about that earlier.
I made a comment earlier to the attorney that we are fine to bill you when we are completed with the audit. If that is more digestible for all of you, we will hold our bill for the estimated 4 months that it takes to complete the audit. When we issue the draft report to management, that is, we are substantially complete, and then it should be completed within 2 to 3 weeks after that. If that is the wishes of the board, we are fine with that.
Okay. Did you have something else, Ms. Morgan?
No,
Okay.
that was my question.
Thank you, Ms. Patrica.
So you are fine with payment upon substantial completion, or 2 to 3 weeks after that, when we get the report?
Like, for example, we issued this report for construction on July 30th. That's when I would like to issue the bill.
How about we do 80/20? When you come in front of us with your oral report, you get the remaining 20.
Okay.
I'm just throwing that out there. I have no ability to do that on behalf of the board, but it's not complete.
When we issue the report to you, it is final and it's public record. And so we issued it on July 30th, August, September, 2+ months to get in front of you, very challenging. But again, I am, if that makes you all more comfortable with how you want to pay us, that is fine with us.
Yeah. Oh, Ms. Giovanelli.
Well, if we have an audit committee, you wouldn't have to go before that, probably before even comes back to the board, so that's even more delayed time.
Correct. However, when we issue the report, and the attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, when the report goes to you all, it is public record.
Yeah.
And it, as far as we are concerned, it's final. Has it been accepted by you? I don't believe so, but that is our final product. I think that's fair.
I think that's fair as well. Thank you.
And I agree. I think that once their job that they were hired to do is completed, the other part is whether or not we accept it or we decide, yes, that's something we want to look into doing or not. That's kind of up to us.
I agree.
Okay. Any further comments, board members, or questions? No. Do you have anything else that you want to review with us? No. Okay. And Ms. Jordan?
Does that work for Ms. Lecter? Is that?
Okay, fine, thank you. Well then, I think it looks like we are finished with the review of the statement of work. Attorney Bruno, do you have anything to contribute?
No, I don't have anything with regards to the statement of work. I know that we'll go ahead and revise it with these last few terms and bring it back to the board for final approval.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and thank you, Attorney Bruno, for all of you.
I'm not done with it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Ms. Patrica has a couple more questions.
Well, investigations was also on the agenda for today, and so I was kind of dealing with statement of work first, and then I wanted to talk about investigations as it relates to the policy that's on the overhead right now.
So, Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
Ms. Vaughn is on the line at this time. I just want you to know that Ms. Vaughn is on the line.
Yes. Ms. Vaughn?
Yes, I'm on the line.
Yes, Ms. Vaughn. Do you have comments?
I don't. I need to catch up with what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And with regards to the investigation part, I believe that's dealing with the waste, fraud, and abuse in the hotline. I do
Yes.
believe that's what Ms. Patrica is referring to.
Okay.
And it does have a little bit to do with the statement of work as well. So I've got some concerns, a bunch of different concerns. I don't even know where to start. The most concerning part for me, I guess, let's start on line 27 of the policy, where it says that the internal auditor will work with legal services to receive complaints and determine whether an investigation should take place. What is legal services? Like, we don't really know what legal services is. I'd like the board attorney to be mentioned in there specifically. What standard are we using to determine at what point we decide an investigation should take place? I think legal sufficiency would be something that I could live with, because I know what that means, but right now we have no standard in place whatsoever. And then I also, and I did discuss these concerns with RSM, I have concerns about RSM being involved in the process of determining whether an outside investigation has to take place, and then them actually conducting the investigation. It seems like they're referring work to themselves, which, and again, I ask this question, if they have their internal auditor hat on and they're auditing this process, I would think that would be inherently risky to have a vendor refer work to itself, essentially. And then,
Ms. Patrica?
RSM is not our vendor, they are.
I understand, but it's essentially the same thing. They're making a decision about additional work they're going to do. It's additional per hour work that they will be doing.
Right.
Yes.
Attorney Bruno.
Patrica, I just wanted to make sure, we're talking about the proposed board policy 1.30, waste, fraud, and abuse. It is on your board docs, because it's set for public hearing. So if you want to review what Ms. Patrica is talking about, and she was referencing line 27, and the rest of that section 2.
And then I think we as a board need to have a conversation before we adopt this as to at what point is an outside audit even necessary. To me, when I read this, I see confusion between internal auditor and inspector general. I think an internal auditor does audits and an inspector general does investigations. And to me, the two should be separate. I mean, sometimes an investigation requires the expertise of an auditor, but to me, an audit is a separate function from an inspector general. And as I looked at other districts across the state, we're not really big enough here in Lee County yet to justify creating an IG department or hiring an IG. We have professional services, and that is essentially our IG department, so to speak. But as I read this, I get no sense as a member of the board when an investigation will be handled internally by a staff that we've already hired and we're already paying, and when it will be referred outside, which is an additional expense and seems very inefficient to me to do that on sort of a willy-nilly basis. So I'd like to know when is that going to happen? What's the process for that taking place? And the process the policy as it stands right now answers none of those questions for me.
So just for the board's clarification, the policy states that for anything regarding waste, fraud, and abuse, a call is made to the hotline or somehow we get information that there's a claim for waste, fraud, and abuse. They will then go to RSM, and as Ms. Patrica had indicated, the policy says legal services, but we can define that further for determination as to what's to do next. And that's what, I also need board clarification on that in terms of that process. And I don't know if you guys.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Dr. Atkins, can you offer guidance as to at what point a waste, fraud, or abuse allegation could come in and you believe it would be on the scope of what existing staff is capable of handling?
I can just look at what we have done in the past. Typically, if you have a situation where there's fraud of a staff member that's been involved, where you have a substantial amount of money, and there's not a number attached to that in terms of this much would be this, but a substantial amount of money that typically does get referred to law enforcement. In addition to that, though, if there's an employee conduct issue, that portion of the investigation does go back to professional standards. There are cases, however, like in the case of the superintendent, in the case of a board attorney, that would almost always have, an outside investigator that the board would assign to do something like that. And in addition to that, if we have a situation where there's a potential conflict of interest, like I recall a few times where there might have been staff that might be involved in actually doing the investigation where there was a conflict, where we referred that to an external investigator. For example, when on literally my first day in the job, the board attorney came to my office and we had to open up an investigation because of, conflict of interest that involved an outside attorney investigating district staff. So that would be an example where it would be referred to the outside.
And I think, from what I understand through Attorney Dupree Bruno, the instance where we would have to hire an outside investigator, those instances are rare. They're few and far between. And so I would feel more comfortable, removing the internal auditor language from there, and then on a case-by-case determination, because it's so rare, the board can decide who and when, right? Does that make sense?
Just to refresh your recollection, this is definitely something we need board guidance on. We need to figure out what process the board is comfortable with. When you have a case that is waste, fraud, and abuse, where is it going and what's triggering it for an investigation, and who will be conducting the investigation? That's what we need guidance on.
Ms. Jordan, then Ms. Gittens.
Sorry, I have so many questions today. On page 6, it's kind of what Ms. Patrica was speaking about with the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline monitoring, and this is my concern, it always has been my concern, about due to the unknown factors and needs, fees for such services will be on an hourly basis. What are those needs? Which, is it the $200 an hour, or which $250 an hour? And then if through coordination with the board attorney is determined that RSM should conduct an investigation in response to the hotline, then they'll be sending us a different statement of work detailing the scope. So we have no idea, and then of course we have to approve that first, but still, this could go, it could go endlessly, the money. We have no idea what that looks like, how much money that entails, and I just think I just have to put that out there.
Ms. Gittens.
I think one thing we have to continue to remind ourselves is that the presence of an internal auditor is a legislative requirement that we must do.
Sure.
And I don't know if it's the company that you have issue with or what the issue is. This is something that we have to do. It's legislated that we have to do this. And the way I see it, kind of big picture, if our internal auditor, whoever that is, comes in and does their assessment and comes back with a report to us, as well as to the audit committee, then the next step for that is still with the board. We still determine what we do next. It's not that they determine. However, it is their job to understand and recognize fraud, waste, and abuse. So they are the experts in it. And I'm sure that if it was something that's a conflict of interest, that they would say so in their professional means. But we still have control. Once the report is done, it goes through the audit committee, it goes through us, and we make the determination. So I don't see where they could just sit and just write bills and submit them and continue to do that. It's all laid out as to what they do. And when you're, which one was it, line 27 you were talking about? The board internal auditor, legal services, and we were talking about that not long ago, about what that means and what that looks like. So we do have to ask that question. We'll receive complaints reported to the hotline generally respond to the complaints in conducting an investigation. So a general overview. But remember that the board still has say-so after the report is received. Do we go forward with them? Do we hire someone else to do it because you feel there's a conflict of interest? We still have control.
Jordan.
I'm not sure if she was referring to me or not, but I just wanted to make something perfectly clear. I have no issues with anyone. I don't care who it is that would be sitting here. I would still be asking the same questions about the money, because when they do go to an investigation, what does that look like? We understand what we're looking at, the amount of money for the HR, the audit for that. We have no idea what this is going to turn out to be and how much money we're going to wind up spending when it comes to the hotline. And yes, we are going to have to come back every time, and yes, the board will decide whether or not we will do that, but still, we have to put that in the back of our mind. That will be money that we need to understand that we will be spending with this. That's the only reason I am saying, because I am concerned on what that money will look like at the end of the day. What is determined to be, worth investigating, what will not be investigated, and where that money will be at.
But can I just say this? If we find it necessary to go ahead and investigate something that could be waste, fraud, or abuse, in the long run, we are saving
I get all that.
money. Because otherwise, if we turn a dark eye to it, then it goes on, and no one ever looks at it, and we could, money could be trickling out through the back door, and we don't know it. So the process, to me, is more, cost-effective and oversight than not doing it, so.
Mrs. Morgan?
So listening to everybody, I think we've got a problem with the policy paragraph 2. And it's got to be, the paragraph needs to be pulled, and it needs to be rewritten in conjunction with the procedure that's been described. I mean, at the very least, I would take out the last two lines, line 31 and 32. The board internal auditor will assist in fact-finding and proposal of recommendations for further action. In fact, we can refer it to the clerk of courts. They do investigations. So, now I'm wondering, as we talk about this, we've written a policy, but we don't understand what the procedure is, and the policy is going to lock us into something that is subject to question. So my recommendation would be that we pull the policy and we go back and we relook at paragraph 2.
So, Ms. Giovanelli?
So, okay, so I have to ask you, because you're the ones that have assisted us in this. So typically, what do other districts do? What is in this part of it? Like, because this is all about processes, and I don't think we have anything in place presently, so I don't know that we eliminate something that we don't have yet, and we may have to work through some of the processes. So what typically do other districts do in such a situation, instance, or whatever?
In our experience as the internal audit function for other school districts, the decision will be made by board attorney working with the board on whether or not they want to execute an investigation. They'll call us. This is what we want to do. Can you put together a scope of work of what this will cost us? We put together a scope of work and we present a cost, and they decide whether or not to have us execute. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I think so.
Thank you. And Ms. Patrica?
So then you're not involved in the front end in other districts determining whether waste, fraud, or abuse allegations should be investigated? You're only involved on the back end?
In some, we are involved in the front end, but the volume has been low.
That helps me understand, because I think this is just all about processes and that we need to have in place, and it's just accountability and transparency with a third set of eyes that would come to us and say, yes, you need to do this, or, this is our recommendation, and then as a board, we make that determination. I don't really see anything wrong with that.
So, and then I think that's part of why we're going to have the audit committee.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a step. It's just a step of transparency throughout the process.
Right. And as I read this, it was clear to me that if the school board chooses. Once a notification has been received and logged through the established hotline by an independent service, as the internal auditors, RSM can monitor and respond accordingly. Response will be determined through the board-approved policies and protocols. So we're in the process of approving our policy on ethics and education, fraud, waste, and abuse, and we need to create the process.
Right.
And I think Attorney Bruno said that they are working on that and that they will continue to work together. Then it says, the protocols and processes for coordination of efforts, including with the board attorney where applicable, investigation and reporting of valid notifications. So if through coordination with the board attorney, it is determined that RSM should conduct an investigation, RSM will propose a separate statement of work detailing scope and anticipated fees for board approval. So I feel like that's our safety net and fail-safe right there. It all comes before the board before any next step is taken for approval. So, Ms. Gittens.
Well, line 31 and 32, I believe, answers that question. It says, the board internal auditor will assist in fact-finding and proposal of recommendations for further action. Not that they will take further action, but again, it comes back to the board. So I really don't see what the issue is, even with this piece of, it culminates in that last line.
Yes.
Whoever is involved after their report or whatever they do, it still comes down to a proposal of recommendation for further action that we can either accept or reject.
One thing to keep in the back of your mind, the reason why you have us as your internal auditors is to have an independent third party. If there is something that this document is going to state that clouds that for you all, then you should take us out of the document. Because that is who we are to you. We are at the pleasure of the board. We work and report to you, and we are your independent third party. To your point, you have people on staff that are very capable of doing investigations. There are certain times when you are going to want an independent third party that knows you, that works for you, that you can call on. And that's what role we should play.
Thank you.
So if the words give you concern or create some type of a conflict, you should alleviate that, because that's our value to you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And
Ms. Patrica.
You just hit the nail on the head for me, because to me, objectivity is lost when you're part of the process of making the determination as to whether we should pay more money for an investigation, and then you're conducting that investigation. The objectivity is completely lost in that process. So if I had a standard in place where I knew that you were working with the board attorney to determine whether legal sufficiency exists to make a referral for an investigation, I'm good with that. And then the board attorney and the board or the audit committee could determine the scope of that investigation. But my concern there too, and I've discussed this with Attorney Dupree-Bruno, is when we have allegations coming in front of us, those are confidential. And how do you have an audit committee meet and discuss confidential information out of the sunshine? So how are these determinations to be made while protecting employee rights?
I would hope that when you got to a certain situation or found circumstances that you wanted input from auditors, that you would call us as your internal auditors. But it probably should be more of a one-off than a baked into the process to give you more peace.
Thank you. Ms. Gittens.
And that's, thank you, that's what I was going to say as well. We very often talk about on this board that this is policy, and then there's procedure as to how that goes. So what we are looking at here is the policy and how, all the rest of the procedures, if we want to change that. But I really, as I continue to read through it, don't see anything wrong, even with paragraph 2, because it does culminate in saying they will make recommendations. Attorney DePrivina, can you speak to the difference in that policy and procedure part of this?
So I think it's really important that we have the process outlined. That's what I need to walk away with today. In terms of the policy, that's completely up to the board's discretion. There is a difference between the policy, which gives us an overarching type of direction, but the process in terms of what happens when this call comes in, where does it go, what do we do with it, who makes the decisions, that's the guideline that I need. And if we need to tweak anything in the policy itself to reflect that, we can do that as well. But I need the process. And since this is the board's, because this is your employee, the internal auditor, this is your process.
Right, that's where I think this, Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
That's where this is a little bit different, Ms. Gittens, is that this is our process. This isn't, we're telling the superintendent what to do, and he decides how to do it. This is we're deciding what to do and how to do it. And the how to do it, to me, is essential in making sure the wording of what is also essential. And right now, regardless of everything else that's been said, there is no standard in this policy. There is no standard for the internal auditor and the board attorney to use to determine when an allegation should result in an investigation. There is no standard or metric in there to determine, and this is part of the process, but I don't know at what point will our professional standards department be handling the investigation, and what would trigger an outside investigation. Does that go in front of the audit committee? Can we protect confidentiality if it goes in front of the audit committee? Or should it come in front of the board in a shade session? There's too much about this that I don't know, and I think it would be irresponsible to not wrap my arms around it better before moving forward.
And Ms. Fisher, can I respond? And I hear what you're saying. I think that the policy part is fine, and the policy part is fine. The process is what we need to put down on paper. And if, it will go from A to B to C, then we can do that. I don't really see us changing this policy document. I see us adding the process part of it.
Ms. Morgan.
No, I have to agree with Ms. Patrica. I think the internal auditor has to come out, as you suggested. At the least, at the very least, we need to take the internal auditor out of the policy. And I do think we need to look at the process, and then we need to make certain that the policy is consistent with the process and doesn't bind us in a way, or open a door, whatever. I'm for pulling the policy, looking at the process, and bringing it back, and having confidence that everybody on this board is comfortable with their policy and process.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Mrs. Giovanelli?
I thought we were, and this is for Attorney Bruno, I thought we had an org chart that drilled down on exactly how things went, and they were in that org chart. And that's been now months ago, so I don't understand now all of a sudden the changes that was part of the process. And because I like the fact that it's going to a different set of eyes, an objective view before it even comes back to us, because maybe it will never even get here to the board. And that's, I don't see anything wrong with it. So maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but I like the fact that it's a third-party, objective recommendation, and they see this way more often in different circumstances and scenarios than we do. So explain to me why they would be taken out. I don't understand.
Well, this is completely to the board's discretion. This policy and what has been brought up to the board from the very beginning has pretty much been the same, where it would go to the internal auditor, but again, it's up to the board in terms of how they want to proceed at this point.
Ms. Gittens?
Can I ask one of you to address in other districts, what is the norm for this process? I mean, for the...
Let me just add this. While we were working on this process, we had multiple conversations. Mr. Williams was part of those conversations with Ms. Ewing and Mr. Blondell when we were hashing out how to draft this document. And this is based on the conversations that we had. This is the document that was created and that was drafted, and this is the process that was created and drafted. Now, we are now looking at adding an audit committee. So I will throw this out there and see if the board would be interested. If there is concern about the internal auditor, can we substitute that for the audit committee? And have it go to the audit committee instead of the internal auditor?
How do you maintain confidentiality with an audit committee?
Well, I think the audit committee, I mean, you're right in terms of the audit committee having the confidentiality issue, and it's going to have to be sunshine, yes. But in terms of the statement of work that comes out, or the labor cost that comes out, without specifically going into names, dates, exactly everything that will identify who the employee is, and just pretty much give an outline with this is how much it would cost, I think that will be acceptable, without going into the specifics, the identifying specifics.
Ms. Gittens?
So if we had someone sitting in an office back there that's our internal auditor, and an audit was done by whomever, at that point that a report was done, would we not want our internal auditor involved in that process? Or
Exactly.
what's the point of having an internal auditor, whether it be an individual or a group of people? Where do they get involved in internal audit? I really don't understand where the question is, and we've discussed it and gone through this whole plan, and now we're here talking about not doing it, doing the policy. And is that going to mean that we don't start the whistleblower procedure, and it's already been a year, so now we're going to take it out another several months? I don't understand that, and I really think we need to move ahead, especially with the whistleblower piece, and I don't understand the angst from individuals as to why we shouldn't move forward with that.
Go ahead, Ms.
So I believe, I can hear your frustration, Ms. Gittens, and I apologize. I was having conversations with the board attorney and with RSM last week, and these issues were raised for me at that time. I think this is part of the rulemaking process. I think that policymaking is the most important thing that we do as a board. So regardless of whether we've been working on it for a year or a week, I want to get it right. And the example that you just used is, I'm going to turn that around a little bit. If we have an internal auditor sitting back there in the board offices, that internal auditor works for us. That internal auditor determines that an outside investigation needs to take place, and every time they determine that, they get a bonus. They get a pay bonus. Every time that internal investigator determines that the waste, fraud, or abuse allegation that came in is sufficient to warrant an outside investigation, they get a bonus. And that's kind of, I know, I'm not accusing RSM of doing anything wrong, but there's a lack of objectivity associated with any recommendation that they would make for an outside investigation when they're receiving payment for doing that investigation. I have zero issues with our internal auditor being involved in the process of determining when an outside investigation needs to take place, looking at those facts, monitoring that hotline, determining when an issue needs to be brought to the attention of the audit committee and/or the board. It's making that determination and then doing the investigation themselves. That's where I have an issue, and I'm sorry, but I mean, that came to my attention last week when I was discussing these issues with the attorney.
Okay, and so can I turn that a little bit so you can see where I'm coming from with it as well? Your issue is the objectivity of who will do that investigation after we have determined an investigation needs to happen.
Correct.
Okay, if we have someone sitting in an office back there that is an employee of ours, an internal auditor, the objectivity could also be said because they always choose the same organization to do it every time. I mean, there's always going to be this objectivity in who does it.
I think you're missing the point of if the internal auditor in the back receives a bonus, that person receives personal financial gain. A company receives financial gain from a recommendation that they're making. That's where the objectivity is lost.
But we still, as the board, have an opportunity to say.
The recommendation is tainted.
But
the
let me just.
is not objective.
But let me just say, once we receive their report and we all decide, yes, it needs to be investigated, then if it's extra on top of their current contract, we can decide to choose someone else to do that instead of them.
Okay, so let's take that out of the policy.
But where does it say RSM in this policy?
It does say RSM will be doing investigations in the policy. It says generally respond to the complaints by conducting an investigation or referring the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation.
Or. So it's there, and we are the or. We make that decision. So
I'd like that part of it taken out because I don't feel comfortable. It's just part of the rulemaking process, nothing personal. Just.
And I'll ask again: are there other districts that this is the way it's done with the other districts? In other words, do you make the recommendation, then they say, yes, let's go ahead and do it, and then you guys go ahead and do the investigation? Does that happen?
Typically, we'll get a call from a district. This is the scenario. This is what we're thinking. What do you think? And we're talking and walking through things with them from that perspective. Now, whether or not they decide to execute an investigation, that's up to them and what they want to have done. And then we execute based on that discussion.
And is it ever that they say, yes, we're going to do it, but we want so-and-so to do it instead of you?
Sometimes they do select others, depending on what it is, right? Depending on what it is.
And is your SOW with that same district, is it stated this same way? With the or, that you can do it, or you can suggest someone else?
Right. The way it's intended is it's or. It does not have to be your independent internal auditor, whether they're in-house or out-house. But again, it all goes back to the board or working through board attorney, legal counsel.
And I will stand on the fact that I think the or is us. We make that determination. No employee of ours can make that determination, and we follow what they say. The or is us. And if we feel there's a conflict there, or if we feel that we need someone with a different expertise, we can decide to do that. I'm just afraid we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater here. I really am, so.
So I'm just going to weigh in briefly. So according to Chapter 1001, Section 42 of the Florida statutes, the school boards of a certain income in state and federal and local funds shall employ an internal auditor. The scope of the internal auditor shall not be restricted and shall include every functional and program area of the school system. On our org chart, or on the state org chart, The school board attorney and the school board auditor are on the same line, okay? And the school board attorney and the school board auditor are our employees, as opposed to being district employees. This is, this is a mandated move that we have made. I heard you say the word consultant, but are you considering yourself our consultant or our school board auditor?
That's how we refer to ourselves in our practice. We have a test services, consulting services, tax services. We're part of consulting services performing internal audit services.
Okay. And you have worked closely with our school board attorney, not only on the policy, but on your statement of work?
Correct.
Okay. And so if line 30 were changed, where it says the board internal auditor, legal services will receive complaints reported to the hotline and generally respond to the complaints. So if we took out by conducting an investigation and left in by referring the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation, would that be, because we're going to public hearing, right, Attorney Bruno, and on the next board for a final approval of this policy? So if we want to make changes, we need to be doing that.
So it depends on what kind of change that you're making. If you're making a grammatical change, that's one thing. If we're making substantive changes, we will have to renotice this so the public has an opportunity to review and then bring it back for a public hearing.
Okay, so is everybody clear on that part?
Yeah,
Okay, so,
It still says "or" in line 30.
yes, Ms. Vaughn, please do.
I'm in agreement with basically what Ms. Gittens said, that, there's or, that's number one. Number two, if we're talking about objectivity, I think that RSM can be trusted until they show they can't be trusted, but I trust them right now to be objective. If they weren't an objective firm, I doubt that they'd be in business for very long. That's my number two. And number three is that, if memory serves me correctly, right from the very beginning, when we first started discussing this, Mrs. Patrico was not particularly in favor of this, and I think, quite frankly, this is kind of a stalling, just stalling, because I can't see that after we discussed it for this long, and yes, there is the length of this, and I think we've been pretty painstaking with it, that we're going to change one minor thing and have to notice it again. I support it the way it is right now. And those are my comments.
Do you have another comment?
Can we call for a consensus on this, or I'm not sure of the process?
Ms. Patrica has a comment
Well,
first.
if we're voting on this tomorrow night, I can't vote yes. In the state that it's in right now, I'm trying to express my concerns and perhaps get everybody on board to reword it in a way that we can all accept it. Ms. Fisher, you just talked about line
30.
30, I think it was?
Yes.
Generally determine, so complaints reported to the hotline and generally determine whether legal sufficiency exists to refer the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation or to the audit committee to determine whether an outside of investigation should take place. Something along those lines I would be very much more comfortable with that. And I am not stalling. I am trying to get the best policy in place for the district.
Right. So I think we're looking at two different things here now. We're looking at the policy, and I'll defer to Attorney Bruno to determine whether such a change would be wording or whether it would be a substantive change. And the other thing we're looking at is the statement of work, including the contract by RSM. So I think we kind of had put those two together and maybe got a little bit off track. So I'll ask Attorney Bruno to weigh in.
Ms. Patrica, can you please go back and advise of your proposal again so I can take a look at it, line 31? Read it again, please.
Legal services will receive complaints. So the board internal auditor, legal services will receive complaints reported to the hotline and generally determine whether legal sufficiency exists to refer the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation or to the audit committee for determination of whether an outside investigation is necessary.
I think that's fine because of the fact that you're talking about legal sufficiency, which to me is implied through paragraph 1, which defines the fraud, waste, and abuse. So I think it's just a clarification rather than a substantive change, with the exception of the audit committee, which is a new component. But the rest of it, I think, is more procedural than substantive.
Yes, Ms. Gittens.
I thought this morning when we discussed the audit committee that you all are working on, the process and everything and the charter and all that for the audit committee. And it was my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong, that the audit committee is kind of an oversight, not as nitpicky as looking at each individual possible investigation, but looking at when you finish a project, that the audit committee then would be, because of their financial background and expertise, would look and say, yay or nay, this looks good, this looks like you've covered everything, boom. I really don't see the audit committee getting involved with, we got something in from the hotline and we need to do an investigation. That's not their expertise. Their expertise is finance and overseeing what you have done to see if we have any waste, fraud, and abuse and your suggestions to fix that. So I really don't believe the audit committee, and maybe others have done that, I don't know, but I don't believe the audit committee needs to be involved in things that where we're worrying about confidentiality. Theirs is at a higher level of oversight and basically financial, I would think, which is why you're saying we need finance people and people with this type of background. They don't have HR background. They don't have, whether or not this person should be investigated. That's not within the purview, in my opinion, of the audit committee.
Thank you. And the board doc's definition of audit committee, the audit committee serves on behalf of the school board as its oversight of the school board's internal audit and investigation functions.
So that does fit the description.
Yep.
As an oversight, right, but not as a performer or a determiner of investigations. They do oversight.
It would, can I?
Yes,
Ms. Fisher, could we move ahead to a consensus, I think, on keeping it the same and not including the auditors? I agree with what you just said and what Ms. Gittens just said. Obviously, Mr. Patrica feels differently, but I'm interested in hearing how the other board members do.
thank you. Ms. Jordan.
I was just going to say, I do have to agree with Ms. Gittens regarding the oversight of the committee, only because they could really be inundated with issues. I mean, we have no idea how many may come across, and for us to ask them to engage in all of that when we spoke about it was going to be quarterly, and that they would overview all of it, everything that has come through, but to ask them to be a part of each and every one of them to decide? Am I understanding that correct, or?
No, that's
That would be
not
too
all-
much.
That's not all what I'm saying.
Okay.
The board internal auditor, legal services will receive complaints reported to the hotline and generally determine whether legal sufficiency exists to refer the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation or to the audit committee. So it would only be that rare one-off big investigation, big allegation of waste, fraud, or abuse that would go in front of the audit committee. The regular everyday, the custodian stole paper towels thing would be handled internally. That's why it's the appropriate department for investigation or.
But then, and can I just say an answer to that? If we do that, then, we're going to have a document this long. If it's over this, or if it's under this, if it's regards to that, I just don't, anyway, I've made my statement. So.
Thank you. Okay, any other statements, board members? Attorney Bruno, anything more from you?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So, looking at the statement of work, have we come to consensus that we're accepting the statement of work from RSM?
Are you asking for?
I'm asking for a consensus.
Madam Chair, I think there are a few corrections that need to be made in the statement of work. Would you mind outlining that for us? So it would be contingent on those corrections.
Okay, contingent on corrections.
To recap, we're going to take out the phone call reference, and then we're going to update the billing reference to talk about the 80/20.
Okay.
So can I ask on that 80/20? So you're saying 80, I don't recall us saying that we.
We didn't,
Okay, we're going to bill 100% the date of the report, sorry.
do 80/20.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
And that's when the draft report or the final report? Final report goes out to you all, whether or not we've had the workshop yet.
Okay, right. Okay, so then do we have consensus, Ms. Vaughn? Are you accepting the statement of work?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Gittens?
Yes,
Ms. Morgan?
with the corrections.
With the corrections. Ms. Jordan?
I will live with it.
Okay, I will accept it. Ms. Patrica?
Still not clear on what their function is with regard to the waste, fraud, and abuse hotline monitoring, so I can't accept it. I don't know what their function is.
Okay, so we have 5 yeses, 1 can live with it, and 1 no. And then, Ms. Bruno, do we need to do something about the policy, or will that be?
So I just need direction from the board whether or not we want to move forward with it, or what you would like to do. It is scheduled for public hearing today, so I need some direction.
All right, and I have one question. When we're looking at paragraph 2, starting with line 28, the board internal auditor, comma, legal services will receive complaints reported to the hotline and generally respond. I'm not sure, and I think Ms. Patrica brought this up earlier in the meeting, what exactly is legal services? Is that their legal services? Is
So
it
that's our internal legal services. We
our
can change.
internal legal services?
Yeah, we can change that if the board wants to put school board attorney, which is the same as reflected in the contract in the SOW.
Ms. Gittens?
I suggest that we change it to the board attorney to make it clean and simple.
I agree.
I can support that.
Okay. Ms. Vaughn?
I support that.
Okay. Ms. Morgan?
That's fine.
Okay, and Ms. Patrica? Yes, okay, that's unanimous. And then will you repeat the other proposed change in wording?
Ms. Patrica, if you could state that
Patrica.
once more, please.
And is this a change to policy, to the policy?
Yes, this is paragraph 2, looking between lines 27 and 32.
There's a proposed change to the policy, and I need to know if the board wants to move with that particular change, or if the board wants to leave it as is, or tweak that particular change. The one part of the change I don't believe is a substantive change, which will require us to pull the policy because it's just including the word legal sufficiency. And I think that's inclusive in that, especially as defined in section 1 above. The remainder of it, and I don't think the audit committee will, that could be viewed as a substantive change, but I think it's arguable both ways. So I would ask Ms. Patrica to reread her proposed change, please.
Okay.
The board, internal auditor, legal services will receive complaints reported to the hotline and generally determine whether legal sufficiency exists to refer the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation or to the audit committee for determination of whether an investigation is necessary, and you could add, or to directly to the board to determine whether an investigation is necessary.
And Ms. Patrica, may I ask you to read that again a little bit slower?
Sorry.
Thank you.
The board internal auditor, legal services will receive complaints reported to the hotline and generally determine whether legal sufficiency exists to refer the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation, comma, to the audit committee for determination of whether an investigation is necessary, comma, or to the school board to determine whether or not that investigation is necessary.
So, Ms. Patrica, I think that sentence with the removal of audit committee and putting the board, I think that goes in line with what's already there in the policy and does not make it a substantive change.
Right.
And it also goes along with the SOW, so I think that will be acceptable, and we could move forward with the public hearing.
And the change also from legal services to school board
I
attorney.
need to see it.
Okay.
Can I
Ms.
ask?
Giovanelli first, Ms.
Oh, okay.
Gittens, and then I'll be ready.
I would like to hear what she was going to ask, though.
Oh, okay.
Well, I just, I'm a little confused, so I will admit it. So I would just like to see that in writing so that I know what change was made where. And so you're basically saying that you're adding the audit committee to this?
No.
So the two changes was to define a little bit in terms of what will be done by adding legal sufficiency. So only complaints that are legally sufficient will be able to move forward, and then stating that it will be referred to the appropriate department or the school board.
So board, I'm just going to say the one thing about the change that you're proposing, and you're the board, you do what you want, it's the board auditor. The whole legal services thing was supposed to be the collaboration between Mr. Williams and Mr. Bruno. And so staff was perfectly fine with that. If you're changing that that part of it was something that, I don't know if we have buy-in, not that that matters, but it is an important point that you need to be aware of.
And that reflects a conversation that I had earlier today where we need to identify the board attorney and an attorney on the staff side as well. So you're right, removing legal services does remove the staff legal from it, but I don't know how to, I wanted the board attorney specifically identified in there, but what you're saying is in line with my comments from earlier today.
Thank you. And okay, and I would agree with that based on my tenure on the board and my experience with the school board attorney and the staff attorney being the legal services of the district of the school board. So I tend to view them as one entity, and that is consistent with the way it is across the state in most districts. Whether they employ a firm or an independent, an in-house school board attorney and a staff attorney, we typically have the legal services under one umbrella, which I think that we are planning on meeting to clarify that for this district. So I would support that. Yes.
I have yet another proposal. The board internal auditor, board and staff legal services will receive complaints reported to the hotline.
Then it encompasses everybody.
Right.
Sounds good to me.
And then generally determine whether legal sufficiency exists to refer the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation or to the board to determine whether an outside investigation is necessary.
Thank you.
If I may, when you refer to legal sufficiency, so would you not want an investigation done if someone broke a policy? Would you only want to put someone in jail, or do you want to terminate them for not following a policy?
That is the law of the district. We are policy governors. So
Okay.
yes, that would definitely be
That
part
would
of
fall under that. That was my only concern with that term.
Yes.
Thank you.
And it's also defined actually in section 1 of the policy. It defines what abuse is, it defines what fraud is, it defines what waste is. So legally sufficient would be if you are violating these specific definitions, then it's legally sufficient to move forward with the next steps.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan, did you have something? Oh, okay. All right, so then we're going to get consensus to move on with the change in paragraph 2, okay?
So, okay, what needs to be expedited to do this? Because I really would like to see it. I mean, we've gone back and forth with changes, and I'm not really clear on the actual changes on here.
Yeah, I will have a draft for you by tonight for you to review for tomorrow's meeting. It should not, it's not going to be a major, it's just adding the legally sufficient as well as changing, I believe it was board and staff attorney, I think was the language, and then adding the school board. So there's 3 things that will be changed. And I think what I will do, because I think legal services is referenced, so I'll just put the parentheses, legal services for the rest of the document.
So you're saying then that this is not a huge change? I don't have your legalese, so we can still continue on with the process.
More of a procedural and a clarifying change rather than a substantive change. So we're changing legal services to board and staff attorney. You're adding legal sufficiency, which is already kind of part of the policy, just not specified because section 1 already provides the definition, so you're just clarifying that. And then because it says because it says or, you're just clarifying that another or, of course, is the board. Those are the 3 things that you're changing. So it's not substantive, it's more a clarifying and a procedural process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And then Ms. Patrica said if we take a break, she can email that to us.
Okay, is the last sentence remaining the same?
Ms. Patrica?
I didn't hear that.
She
The
said, what's
last
the
sentence
last
remaining the
sentence?
The
same.
last sentence, the board internal auditor, that sentence that remains there, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to be sure.
Should we do that just to get it done?
All right, are you okay, Ms. Gittens, or would you like to take a break and have her email it to us?
Well, Ms. Bruno said that she can get it to us before vote tomorrow, so that's fine with me. I can
Okay,
receive
then.
it from her.
Okay, then at this time, I'll ask for consensus, and I'll start with you, Ms. Vaughn.
I can't give consent.
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Morgan? She can live with it, okay. Ms. Gittens?
Can live with that.
Okay. Ms. Jordan?
Yes, ma'am, I'm good.
I
Okay.
gotta see the language before I can agree to it. I'm sorry. If we just take a 5-minute break and everybody look at the language, then
What
we
is your
can come to real
proposal?
consensus. And then we can go back on my consensus vote and I can give consensus for the contract as well.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
this would be my
Attorney
recommendation to the board,
I'm
just to
sorry.
make sure that we actually have a consensus today versus bringing it up at the action meeting where there may be an issue and it gets pulled. I would recommend taking that 5-minute break so we can just look at that sentence that has been changed and then make sure all of the board members are in agreement. That will save maybe some confusion and some issues tomorrow.
And Madam Chair, can you please ask Ms. Patrica to work with Ms. Bruno to get that wording done?
I just emailed it to her.
Okay, and so at this time, 2:30, we'll take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 2:35.
I'm working on it. I have to do that.
Okay. All right, we'll resume our meeting at this time. And I'll turn it over to Attorney Dupree Bruno.
So board members should have a copy of the revised language, and it's also on your screen. The sentence that was added reads, "The board internal auditor, board, and staff legal services will receive complaints reported to the hotline and generally determine whether legal sufficiency exists to refer the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation or to the board to determine whether an outside investigation is necessary."
Okay. Ms. Bond, did you hear that?
She should have gotten the email as well.
Ms. Bond, are you with us? All right. Well,
Maybe look-
then at this time, we'll go ahead and ask for consensus in agreement with this change to the proposed policy. Ms. Morgan? Okay. Ms. Gittens?
Yes, the one question I have, to determine whether legal sufficiency exists to refer to the appropriate department. So we're still only saying that if a complaint comes in, the only place it can go is to a department for investigation.
Well, the board internal auditor and board and staff legal services,
Yeah, but they are
then they-
determining whether it goes to a
whether
department.
legal sufficiency exists, and then they'll refer it either or.
Well, there's not an or, that's why I was asking.
Yes, there is, ma'am. It exists to refer the complaint to the appropriate department for investigation.
Oh, okay.
Or to the board to determine whether
Okay,
an outside.
sorry, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. And Ms. Giovanelli,
I can live with it.
you can live with it, okay, we have 2 can live with it and 1 absent and 4 yeses. Ms. Gittens, you can live with it, right?
No, I was a yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, 5 yeses.
I'll go with it. I'll go with consensus.
There you go.
Okay. Now it's 6 to 1, yes.
Thank you. So then we will proceed then with the public hearing on this rule for tomorrow.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for our board auditors?
Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you very much for
Thank
being
you for your
here
patience.
and helping us through this process. We appreciate it.
Journey.
Thank you.
Safe travels. Okay, so next,
She's gone.
We told her safe travels.
No, I told her, no.
next on the agenda is the review of the October 6, 2020 regular meeting agenda. Dr. Atkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we'll go ahead and start. The first item is the item we were talking about at the end of, or earlier this morning, which was the consent executive services, approval of the resolution proclaiming October. And there was actually 2 questions that you see, but I would also say there was also other concerns that were raised by board members. And then the issue that I was going to raise that I think we need some direction on is that in terms of the resolution, there is no process, so to speak, for resolutions in terms of what ones that we select or not select. This is not really something I've been involved in, but as we dove into looking and seeing whether or not we have a procedure, we do have a procedure that was drafted way back in 2008, but again, it doesn't speak anything to how these are selected. I think, what we've seen is it's created a little bit of concern by a number of members in terms of what's on here and what's not. So I think that rather than staff being caught in the middle of this, if we had a protocol or procedure for what would land on a board agenda, if any, that would be very helpful. The questions that came up, one was why we're not reading all cultural resolutions, and then another one that was referring to National Italian American Heritage, and then approval of the resolution proclaiming October 1st through the 31st LGBT. There was a question about that. Discuss the details of this resolution. Parents want to see the curriculum that's reflected. And the other thing, just as a comment, I would have to say that back to the selection piece, today is like World Teacher Day. It is also, October is National Principals Month. These are things that are not, that, if we're going to do something, these would be things that you would think would be included. They are not. So I just believe that we need some direction on this.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we'll begin with Ms. Gittens.
My suggestion is that there are so many different things, I did not realize it was World Teacher Day, that we be, as a board, look at a list and prioritize. It's our decision whether to read it or to put it out there or whatever, and I think we should, as a governance team, make that decision. And is there a way to determine how we would get a list and of the different days or months or weeks, and is there a clearinghouse for such things so we don't leave anybody out?
So I was just going to comment that since 2008, we have had so many more occasions for resolutions come on the list, and it would probably be longer than we even anticipate. As a matter of fact, the County Commission, in honor of Mrs. Morgan and I, read a resolution that October is National Falls Month for people over 65 who fall a lot. So, I think that we have to really have this conversation and decide how we're going to do this. Are we going to list those things that are pertinent to us in the school district? Are we going to include everything? I mean, it could be National Chewing Gum Day or Pencil Sharpening Day, and I think that might be a little bit beyond what we want to recognize, but I think that we have our major holidays and groups that need, deserve to be recognized and are done so nationally, so maybe we can look about that and prioritize. I did speak with Attorney Bruno, and I will involve Ms. McClung, and I think perhaps it'll be wise for us to review the list and then again review it frequently to put it in our protocols exactly how we're going to handle those. Are we going to list them? Are we going to read certain resolutions? Are we going to invite groups when we get back to that point like we had done before? So I think we have those questions to answer, and that's something that we will certainly work on together at a workshop when we are addressing our protocols, and I'll have that on the list for Ms. Schaefer and Ms. McClung. So, board member comments. Ms. Gittens.
Well, my question then is, the ones that are on there now, and basically the questions that I listed here, if we're doing cultural, then we need to do Italian as well as Hispanic. And there has been a lot of push and pull for the LGBTQ from the community and parents and all of that. And I think we need to discuss it. And the main thing that I heard from parents that were ringing the phone off the hook for the last several days is the word educate in line 6, because their concern is, it's not that they are not, what's the word, in agreement with anyone's lifestyle, but that the education of their children, and I'm quoting, of their children regarding such issues, they feel that they should have a say-so in that. And therefore, is there questions where, is there a curriculum, or how is that going to be presented, and that type of thing. And since it was the first time I saw it on there, I brought those questions
So,
forward.
if I may just respond, I have been invited and accepted an invitation to be a member of Equality Florida School Board Advisory Group for LGBTQ and plus resilience. So this is the first year that you'll see this resolution because of some recent legal precedents that were set across the country. I just want to say that some of the things that we have done in our committee, in our district, the school board updated and approved the non-discrimination policy language to include gender expression and gender identity. Around the district, best practices and action step one-pager, which I have a copy of somewhere here, to include the statement of non-discrimination policy, just addresses the idea of gender equity. GSA Google Classroom has been created to provide resources and supports to GSA advisors at many of our middle and high schools, and our diversity department has provided the following trainings: creating safe and inclusive classroom strategies and pedagogy to support LGBT youth. All principals were trained. LGBT students and a roadmap for their safety and well-being in Lee County schools, training for school psychologists, social workers, and equity leads. And then also GSA advisor collaborative learning sessions. The district receives support and guidance from Equality Florida's Institute Safe and Healthy School Project to foster a culture of inclusion while countering bullying, harassment, social isolation, and bigotry that dramatically increase the risk factors for LGBT students. The Safe and Healthy School Project provides support to 63 of 67 school districts throughout the state of Florida, including Lee, Charlotte, Collier, etc., Sarasota. Equality Florida's Safe Schools Directive provides professional opportunities for district and school-based administrators, equity coordinators, counselors, social workers, psychologists, nurses, and student support staff. Additionally, the district receives resources and support from the Trevor Project, Suicide Prevention Hotline, and the GLBT National Help Center. The school district of Lee County joins with 6 out of the top 10 districts throughout the state of Florida to support and affirm students and staff by offering a resolution during LGBT History Month. Florida's Next Generation Sunshine State Standards serves as the adopted standards and benchmark for instruction in accordance with the Student Progression Plan and state-adopted and vetted textbook materials. The district continues curriculum and instruction as provided in these state-adopted standards. Adoption of the proposed resolution does not create or modify adopted curriculum, but rather expresses willingness to work together to promote equal protection of all Lee County students and staff, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. So those are the talking points, and that's my contribution to the discussion. So I'll entertain other thoughts. Ms. Morgan.
Well, and looking through the list, we're recognizing some things that have been recognized by Congress. We're recognizing some things that have been recognized by the state of Florida. We're recognizing some things that have been recognized by nobody, except that there's a commission or someone who's asked us to do it. We have cultural, we have political things on here. I think we should pull all the resolutions. I think we should come up with a protocol, because if we pass a group of well, let me back up a minute. There's a difference also between recognitions and resolutions. A recognition is simply an acknowledgement of something that exists. A resolution is a statement of action. It's an action statement. We intend to. And I think Ms. Gittens raises a very good question with respect to the resolution and what we mean with respect to education. I am concerned that if we go into a process whereby we approve recognitions and resolutions without any, as Chris calls them, rails, that we have no precedence, and so we are not in a position to turn anybody down for any recognition or resolution for any reason. And I think it's simply a mistake to move forward on any of this without a statement of what is acceptable to this school board in terms of resolutions and recognitions. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Ms. Giovanelli?
Actually would support everything she just said, because, I mean, it was just said very eloquently. I mean, I think that it's important that it is National Bullying Month, but we're no tolerance to bullying. It doesn't matter who they are. So I think that's really important too, that we already practice that. So, I mean, I agree. I think I'd like to see the list, because I think we need to decide on what is a priority in our education system, and acknowledge that, and what action are we going to take? Because I've had several teachers contact me, and they're like, well, you know, how do we educate, we've not been trained on how to say this correctly, and we don't want to offend. You could offend one side, you could offend another on some things, and we have to be very careful. We don't want to offend anyone, because I think everyone is entitled to the education. So I would agree with Ms. Morgan. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Vaughn, are you with us?
Yes.
Do you have any comments regarding the resolutions? And I guess in particular, we have had more feedback about the LGBT resolution, both pro and con, and I'm sure you've seen the emails.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think in general, we've gone way overboard with the number of resolutions, and with no end in sight. I'm a little concerned about, at this point, I don't know if Ms. Morgan intended that for tomorrow night already that we pull. I think it's something we should consider. I'm not big on pulling the LGBTQ at this point. I think it'll send a message, a negative message, although there may be school board members that wouldn't accept it. I don't know. But I think that one word, educate, is what really threw people off, because most of what I saw focused on that, and what's the curriculum, and talking about first graders and that sort of thing. So I don't know how to fix that easily. So those are my comments.
So, and that part of the resolution that has the word educate in it.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just going to read that again so that people hear it clearly. Whereas community-based organizations and community leaders have partnered with the School District of Lee County to educate, support, and provide resources to promote a safe learning environment for all students and families. And it mentions nothing about curriculum beyond.
No, I know that, but I think probably all of us got feedback of people misunderstanding on that one word and bringing in curriculum, and I mean, I had one that talked about indoctrination.
Yes.
So there's been a huge misunderstanding on that one. As I said, I don't know how to smoothly fix it. Anyway.
Well, I thank you for your comments, and Ms. Morgan has.
Yeah, I
further
forgot
comment.
to ask you, you're on this Equity Florida Commission?
I am on the Equality Florida School Boards Advisory Board for the state of Florida.
So that's under the auspices of the Florida School Boards Association, or who's?
No, they're a school board advisory group with Equality Florida who handles gender and diversity issues. And they have presented trainings here in our district as well across the state, and they work with 63 of the 67 districts in Florida. And I'm on their board advisory board. I think I was invited by virtue of being the chair, but I did accept because I believe in safety and security and equal opportunity for all groups.
I think Ms. Patricia had her hand up, and then I have another comment.
Patricia.
That's okay. I hate to do this to you, Attorney Dupree Bruno, but I think we need to dump this in your lap. Part of what we need to rely on you for is the drafting and/or reviewing of board policies and resolutions. And I think we as a board need to have a discussion about what kinds of resolutions we're going to be reading, adopting, and the language that will be in them. I agree, I got a lot of concerns about the word educate, and to me, the word educate in there is simply a matter of educating against bullying, harassment, and, what's the other word? Intimidation?
Yes.
Inclusion. With the bullying thing, it was inclusion.
And so, and the other thing that I heard is we only adopt resolutions that have been adopted by presidents of both parties. I'm not clear on why that would enter into as a decision-making factor at all. So I think we need to look at the entire thing as a board and determine how to move forward. And this is not, this has nothing to do with any of the ones in front of us today. I was actually, the reason why I brought it up is because we were slated to read one that is not in accordance with the agreement that we as a board made last year. Last year on October 3rd, 2019, we agreed that we would read aloud only those resolutions that had something to do with ethnicity or race.
And federal as well. We said it had to be.
That was not what I proposed. I said based on ethnicity or race alone. That was what the board agreed to. And I mean, I just went back and watched the tape. And then there was a resolution to be read aloud on this week's agenda, and I was like, how did that get there? That's not what the board agreed to. So I think we just need to, our action meetings have to be action meetings where we actually conduct the business of the district, and if we're going to be reading 12 resolutions, we're never going to get the business of the district done. And how do we pick favorites?
You do have that in the October 3rd minutes. It said the board reached consensus to change the board protocols to allow the reading of resolutions with regard to recognition of specific racial and ethnic groups. I mean, that's what's in the minutes.
Ms. Jordan.
Yes, thank you. I was in the same, and I was looking at all this too, because I'm Italian heritage, so I was, what about me?
Happy month.
But, so when you're looking at, you know, choosing certain ones over others, I think that is, we need to be very, very careful with that, because we do not want to ever offend anyone in our actions in reading or not reading. We had that incident last year with that. And I just think that we need to be very careful. But as far as like the LGBTQ, I know everybody's emphasizing on that. We have to make sure that our staff and students do feel like they're safe and that, they can come to school in a safe environment. So I definitely want that to be put out there, because a lot of times, things get pulled up and now we're backtracking again on, what are we going to do with this? Because this is happening tomorrow. But I know also October is chili month. There's like 150 different things for this month. I was up all night checking those out to see, which ones did we miss or who are we going to offend? But we really have to be cautious when we're coming up with these choices, and we have to look at that, I think, beforehand, before it reaches this point where we're sitting here now having this whole conversation about who we may hurt or who we may not hurt. And that really, that weighs really heavy on me, because I do not want to ever offend anyone, regardless of who they are.
Ms. Giovanelli.
Ms. Jordan, just to clarify one point, the National Italian American Heritage Month was scheduled to be read at the next action meeting. So I think in the past, you have had a bunch of resolutions on your consent agenda, then you vote on it, and then the next meeting you would read whichever ones you decided. So I just want to make sure you know Italian Heritage Month was going to be read.
I was just using that as an example.
I think Ms. Gittens had her hand up.
But Ms. Giovanelli first, and then I'll follow.
And just real quick, so I'm Scottish too, I don't see that on the list, so just saying, this could go on and on. So, so who determined the schedule for this? Because we as a board did not, so I think that's important to note, that I think we need to, as a board, make a determination, look at the list, and pick out what we're going to do for the next 12 months, and then it's set that way, instead of having it put on an agenda and get surprised by emails before you actually get a chance to read the agenda even. So I think that, because you couldn't even answer the questions before seeing the agenda even. So, we received emails, like I said, the agenda went out, emails would boom, so I think we have to, I would agree with Ms. Morgan. I would say let's pull what's presently there and look at all the resolutions and set our calendars for that on the next, actually would be the next 24 meetings, if there's 2 a month or whatever, so the schedule meetings.
Mrs. Giovanelli, this is a sample of what we have on the agenda for October.
Right.
We definitely have to, moving forward, have a protocol or a process for which we're going to recognize and which we're going to read, if we are going to read them, in fact, or just list them. We definitely need to do that, because the number has grown so much that it would be impossible to accommodate everyone. So we do need to have that conversation, and I think it probably is going to take a workshop.
Yeah.
I think that some of these on here are for, like, National School Lunch Week, National School Bus Safety Week, which is definitely pertinent to us, National Red Ribbon Week, and it's also Substance Abuse Prevention Month, so that kind of encompasses that. And we were scheduled to read number 3, 4, 5, and 6 for tomorrow night. Oh, and 7.
Really? Oh.
So if we are going to pull,
Just for clarification, there are 2 on the agenda to actually be read tomorrow.
Right.
One of them was the Hispanic Heritage Month, which the board actually had mentioned at the last meeting, that you voted on it and you were going to read it. And the other one was the Disability Awareness Month, which I believe has been pulled from reading, but will still be on the consent agenda for acknowledgement.
okay, thank you. I wasn't aware that that was pulled for, okay. So then, we have had some feedback, again, both pro and con, about the LGBTQ issue. And so I think that, you know, if we pull one, we have to pull them all. I mean, we can't, in this day and age, do that. Our non-discrimination policy says that we respect and honor all different groups. And so, Ms. Gittens, please.
Okay, I have a suggestion. That because in October we already did say we would just recognize cultures and heritage. We have already said that Hispanic heritage that was announced at the last meeting, I really believe, considering the makeup of our district demographically, that we should go ahead and read that one, because we have said it, and because of, you know, it is cultural. My suggestion, the bullying month or whatever is kind of all-encompassing. It encompasses all of these areas that we're talking about. You know, we have on here that we were going to read disability. Well, that's a part of bullying as well, and so is LGBTQ. And all of those, you know, are kind of under that bullying month. And plus, there was, I can't remember what you call it, but there's something out there about the bullying month, and the schools are going to recognize it on the 21st of the month, and everyone's going to wear orange, and the kids are going to do pictures and all that type of thing, and it's already out there with the schools. So I'm just thinking that if we do anti-bullying month, it covers all of that. Now, the third part of it is with the LGBTQ. It's out there, and it's going to create issues taking it off or leaving it on. But my suggestion is to remove paragraph 6, which is about education, and leave the rest as generic, and have it under the auspices of bullying month, anti-bullying month. So that's my suggestion, because it's a lot more encompassing of all the things that are bullied.
Board members?
I think that is kind of what we need to do in a workshop, what you just said. We need to have this discussion and come to agreement surrounding what we do and what we don't adopt, instead of picking favorites here right now and deciding what to be read or what to be passed tomorrow night. We need to take a comprehensive look at all of it and figure out what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, what is our role as school board members.
And I agree with that, and that's what I was saying, that comes after, but right now, what is in front of us, an expedient that is going to affect massive numbers of our community, is to make some decision about tomorrow night. And to just say, if we say, well, we're going to have a workshop and then we have to wait till that comes up, we're going to pass all of these things that are already out there that we have said we're going to recognize, and especially Hispanic Heritage Month.
So my suggestion is that, because this is an advertised agenda, and we have gotten some feedback from some small portion of the community, both pro and con, and this is an advertised agenda, and we want to be equitable, we want to be respectful of all diversity. My suggestion is that we need to proceed with the agenda as advertised for tomorrow.
I'm sorry, Ms. Fisher, I can't support that.
No, and I also think, I mean, we worked really hard for like policy 1.27, which encompasses all of the stuff regarding to LGBTQ. And that EDAC committee worked months and months and months to try to make sure that we had the right verbiage to make sure that everyone was covered. And so to me, it has nothing, it's not about educating, it's about the right of the person. It is about the person. So, I don't know how you pull one without the other. You cannot do that.
Ms. Giovanelli?
Paragraph out.
And my point is, everyone's rights are the same. There's nothing, so I don't know how, my thought is, what happens next month? If we don't address this now, what happens next month for the next resolutions? My concern is, when will this be a workshop? I think you have to address it ASAP. I don't think you wait until, because it's already, it's a win, it's a lose-lose. No one wins in this situation right now. We just need to get our act together, and I don't think we have. So that's my opinion. And make a determination of what we're going to have each month and set that.
And we can, with our workshop, we can establish a protocol for that. We just currently do not have that. Beforehand, our office staff really basically handled that, but it has grown to the point now where the public is commenting on it, and so we do have to have that workshop. But the fact is that this is an advertised agenda. It's been out there, and I would not support pulling anything from this agenda for tomorrow night.
Okay, so is the main thing that I've heard everyone say from the comments and the phone calls and all that they've received, that we have received, is the part about educating children. So to me, a win-win is to leave it in, but remove that, because we don't have a definition to tell parents, well, what are you going to educate my child with? And I am in no way against anyone's rights, and I believe everyone should be treated fairly. But I think if we remove the part about educating, just removing that one paragraph, then we could go ahead with that, as that was the main issue. The recognition still remains, but of the fact that it's an issue. On the other hand, in October, the board decided this is what we're going to do, and that didn't happen. Somewhere that fell through the cracks. But it's still out there that the board's ruling is we recognize.
It wasn't a ruling, it wasn't a vote, it was a consensus, first of all. And next of all, we've had an unusual year because we have been meeting virtually, and we haven't even been doing recognitions and resolutions for part of the time because of our unusual circumstances this year.
Also, just to clarify, the October 3rd workshop in the minutes indicates this is with regards to what you're going to read. Not necessarily what resolution you're going to vote on, but just what you're going to read.
Exactly. Okay, well, Mrs. Morgan.
Well, I just want to revert back to what Dr. Adkins said when he started, that we're not talking to our people with these resolutions. We're not talking about the principals, we're not talking about the staff. I just don't think it's appropriate for us to move forward with a set of recognitions or resolutions that we as a board have not agreed are what we as a board want to recognize and resolve.
Well, then I guess should we take, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How did each of these items land on the agenda?
That's
Like,
why
I remember,
I asked that.
I'm on the wrong part of the agenda. I remember national bullying, I remember Italian American, I remember Hispanic. I don't necessarily remember disability history. I don't remember LGBT. I remember national bus safety. I don't remember red ribbon. Like, how did these get here?
So there was a list, to my understanding, there's a list that this office staff had, and this has been going on for years. It's never become an issue before. As I explained earlier when I read my information from Equality Florida, this is the first year for the LGBT resolution.
So that was, are you the one that put it on the agenda?
No, I'm not the one that put, well, I'm not the one that put it on the agenda, but I did submit it because I was requested to by the people at the state level. And honestly, I didn't give it a thought that there would be a problem with it because we have such a high LGBT population here in Lee County and across the country.
And I hear what Ms. Gittens is saying about the education piece, because I had somebody specifically say to me, why are we recognizing National Bus Safety Week? Shouldn't we be teaching bus safety in our schools all day, every day? Isn't that something that should be an integral part of what we're doing? So why are we recognizing it? And then when you use education in the context of LGBT, that raises questions in the public's mind as to what are you educating? What is the curriculum? How are teachers trained? What's going on? And it raises a flag that I don't think is reflected in reality. It's not like we're teaching kids about LGBT as much as we are about anti-bullying, anti-harassment, anti-intimidation. But you can see how adopting national school safety, we're educating our kids on that all the time. And then you talk about education in the context of LGBT. Are we educating our kids all the time? What does that education look like? I can understand the confusion in the community.
Ms. Fisher?
Yes.
If everyone would take a second to pull up the Anti-Bullying Month resolution, and let's just take a look at that, and then you'll understand too in fact, what Ms. Patrica just said. As you're reading through there, there's nothing in there about educating kids about it, and yet we as a district are doing activities in the classroom to do with anti-bullying. The next to the last whereas reads, whereas bullying is a community problem requiring students, teachers, parents, and other adults to work together to create a climate that does not tolerate bullying. That still is as overarching as bullying is, the word educate is not here. That's the difference. And in the minutia of the LGBTQ, as a form of bullying, we mention education. So I think that's what the difference is, and that's what parents are saying. I mean, parents are saying to me, I don't want you telling my 7-year-old what LGBTQ means. And with us having the word educate in there, that they are assuming that's what we're doing. So, anyway.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Giovanelli?
Dr. Atkins and I had this conversation. Are teachers even properly trained in how to educate that? And they're not, I mean, he clearly told me no, and teachers are not comfortable with that until they know how to handle that appropriately. So I just don't think we're there yet, and because we have to have proper training. So I think that's one issue in itself.
But isn't that that's part of their sensitivity training, right? How to be sensitive towards
That's what I thought.
everyone, right? So I think that's part of their
Being kind is how we should be always, no matter what.
Correct.
So I just.
Thank you, Mrs. Giovanelli. Ms. Morgan?
So there's another issue here, and that is that something ended up on the agenda because one board member put it on for recognition. And that means that any board member can put one on, and then we would end up with this conversation because there are no parameters for recognitions. So I think we need to walk back and think.
And admittedly, and I think we already determined that we do need to have a workshop and establish some protocols and processes for recognitions in the future. And whatever the board decides to do with this, I've given my opinion. Ms. Gittens?
Well, what if, Ms. Fisher, would you feel comfortable then in your comments mentioning it and having it as a part of, what you have to say at the board meeting tomorrow?
Depending on what the board decides, that would be fine.
And could we see if, since it's already out there, if we took out the education piece, what kind of consensus we'd have to go ahead and mention it, not necessarily read it, but to leave it on there?
Can I ask something, please?
Yes, please, Ms. Vaughn, I was just going to ask you.
Thank you. Yes, the word education was the word that really brought out a lot of the comments that I received. However, I'm going to say very honestly, as soon as that resolution is brought up, nobody in the audience is going to hear whether or not the word education is missing. They're only going to hear, oh no, they're reading that, terrible, or yay. I really think, and I think it's there. I agree with Ms. Fisher that it would send that, assuming that the rest of the board is okay with it. Personally, I am, but it will send a really bad message if we pull the whole thing. And I don't think it's going to solve anything if we just omit the word education or educate. I agree with Ms. Morgan that we need to take a very, very close look at what we're doing with all of these, because, I'm Italian American, but when I saw it on there, I'm like, okay, why? I think we, if we're looking at categories, by the way, it struck me, some of these have to do with people, in particular, people that are in our district and people that are often marginalized. And I think that's what makes the difference. When we have national, one that always gets to me is something like Sleep Week, when our high school kids get school so early. There's some that it, not going to raise anybody's hackles one way or the other. But that just happens to be a hot button issue. But what are we really saying if we... I think moving forward, we need to re-examine the whole thing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Vaughn.
The reason that the issue is raised, I think, you have had the retiring of a staff member that was like the keeper of this process. This was something that in my role, I really just didn't pay that close attention to. It was just kind of something historical. And I also kind of considered these are board resolutions, not superintendent resolutions. So I wasn't really concerned about the process. But what happened here was this jumped on the agenda. People started asking me questions about, how did this get here and how did that get here? And it was not just one, it was multiple ones that came up, and I can't answer the question. And then when I go back and look at, do we have protocols in place, the answer is no. We did have an old process document that I wasn't aware of either, which really doesn't address the issue at all, and one conversation that occurred last year. Beyond that, there is no direction with how certain items are on the resolution list and certain ones are not. And I really think in this case, again, we are trying to do the will of the board here, and it's very difficult when there's not a consensus relative to how that happens. This isn't something that staff put on there. This is historically what was what has been going on for a long time, but I think moving forward, we have to do something so that it's clear for us so we can do what you want us to do.
So in August, on the 20th and 21st, after I had had a meeting with Equality Florida, in one of my one-on-ones with you, Dr. Atkins, I did talk about this and explained what was going on. We talked about the diversity and inclusion, the new policy, the non-discrimination policy, gender identity, et cetera. And we talked about the mental health support to include those issues. And I told you about Equality Florida and the GSA advisors trainings. And, you know, honestly, I submitted it, and like I said, I didn't think it would be an issue in this day and age. And I'm disappointed that it is. And so, like I said, whatever the board wants to do, I think that's it. And we will definitely make sure that we have board approval on yet one other thing before it comes to the board. And as a member of the governance team, I would like to know what your final recommendation would be for us at this point.
I think you need to have a process in place before moving forward. That's what I think you should do.
So then are you saying that we just take off this particular resolution for tomorrow night?
For me, it wasn't about a particular resolution. And this wasn't the only one that was questioned. There were questions on at least 2 others that I'm aware of.
Okay, so I heard something about the Disability History and Awareness Weeks, which we have done before, and I'm of Italian-American descent too, but I never saw that one on before and wondered why it was there, but hey, you know, we're a melting pot country. So I think we need to come to some final decision and move on about what are we doing for tomorrow night. Ms. Giovanelli.
So one of the other things too, a lot of these I feel should go through EDAC, so, and get their recommendation and opinion on things too, because I think EDAC should weigh in on some of it as well. So that's part of the conversation we need to have as a workshop. And you know, what do we?
Right, and those are all things that we can put on our agenda for the workshop. And when we can do that, which is not going to be now because we have the rest of the agenda to go through, and we're already at 3:34. So I think we need to just move on, make a decision about what we're doing with tomorrow night's agenda. Are we removing one resolution? Are we removing them all?
I wouldn't recommend singling out anything. I think we remove them all and until we have our list and that we can go by. And then that could be something that's on a calendar and every school would have it. I mean, and then it would be noticed and everything at that point in advance. So I don't see, I see, because I think we need to decide what is our role as a board member and what resolutions we should be adopting and promoting. So that would be my.
So your recommendation is that we remove all for tomorrow night? Okay. All in favor of Mrs. Giovanelli's recommendation, please let us know by giving us an affirmative sign. Ms. Jordan?
No. And I'm a no.
Okay, so we have 2 yeses, 1 can live with it, and 4 noes.
So can I make another recommendation?
Yes, ma'am.
So, okay, so that one did not.
Oh, it passed.
No. No, we
Ms.
were voting
Fisher,
to
you
agree
said-
with her and 4 were no.
Yes. I think there were 2 yeses.
Ms. Morgan?
Ms. Bruno, can that?
You had 2 yeses, 1 I can live with, and 4 noes. So it did not pass
Oh, okay.
the consensus.
I'm sorry.
But Ms. Fisher, if I could just advise the board in terms of Robert's rules, and just a reminder in terms of what a resolution actually is, because a resolution is actually a formal motion. That's basically what it is. So you are moving whatever that resolution is, and you are taking a board decision altogether with regards to whatever that particular resolution is. It's just a formal motion.
Yes. Thank you. All right. So we're not removing all for tomorrow night. Ms. Gittens, you have another recommendation?
So my recommendation is to go back to our original decision to only read cultural, and therefore we would only read the Hispanic Heritage Month. And the second part would be, if you're going to list the others, to please just remove the paragraph that says educate, and it can be explained to the public as to why.
Only read Hispanic Heritage
Because
Month?
it's the only cultural one that's there, and that's what we had already decided to do.
Attorney Bruno, did, on that October 3rd, was that cultural only, or was that cultural and ethnicity?
Well, I mean,
So the consensus was to read specific racial and ethnic groups, resolutions with regards to racial and ethnic groups.
So then that would include Italian American.
but they're not till next month, I thought, right?
That was supposed to be read at the end of at the next October meeting.
Next meeting.
I apologize, but I was not informed of that. Okay, thank you. So then we're only going to read
Well, that's my proposal.
Hispanic Heritage Month. That's Mrs. Gittens' recommendation. Board members in agreement with that? And we'll leave the rest on the list as it is.
No, the other part of it was to remove educate from that LGBTQ part. And let me just say really quickly, if we don't remove that piece, and I know Ms. Vaughn mentioned that, people are going to see it one way or the other. But if we have it even on there just like it is, it's going to create more of a tempest in a teapot and not just be able to say, no, we're recognizing this is part of bullying, but we're not educating your children. That is the key factor. And I think if we take that out and have that explanation and talk about anti-bullying month and, that all of this is a part of it.
Ms. Patrica.
Can I answer that, please?
Ms. Vaughn, can you, I have Ms. Patrica first, and then,
Oh,
okay, thank you.
I've got issues with Equality Florida as well. I just Googled them, and it appears as if they're a political organization. It talks about 2020 Election Center, Justice. They have a political action committee. I'm not at all clear why we would resolve as a school board to do anything with a political action committee or with a political group. So you have issues with education. I have issues with that word as well, but I also have issues with who are we partnering with? What are we doing? What are we declaring here? Like, that doesn't make sense to me.
But to me, that's the deeper conversation that we're going to have in the future. And the immediacy right now is, who are we going to offend the most?
Well, but that's kind of the issue. Without having had a board discussion, one board member put a resolution on an agenda, putting us each in a position where we have to say, yes, we agree with educating children on LGBT, or no, we don't. Yes, we agree with supporting Equality Florida, or no, we don't. And this is not a position any of us should be in. And I'm disappointed that we're here. I'm disappointed that we're having this conversation, but we are where we are. And I'm going to go back to the conversation that we had surrounding policy. Let's get it right. Let's not be fast, let's not be quick. Let's get it right before we move forward and approve something that half of us are uncomfortable with approving, and the other half of us are uncomfortable with not approving because we're afraid of how the public's going to look at it. Let's get it right.
But that's not my concern as to how we're going to look. It's the equity
All
of
right,
it.
ladies, we just need to make a decision to move forward. We need to make a majority decision on what we're going to do with tomorrow night's agenda. The rest of it, we will deal with at our to-be-scheduled workshop.
So then I'll leave the first part of mine was only read Hispanic Heritage Month as planned.
Board members, everybody in agreement with Ms. Skitten's proposal that we only read, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Vaughn, you wanted to weigh in. I apologize.
Oh, and actually, I'll comment on what you just said. I'm okay, I can live with just reading that one. I cannot live with taking out, I'm not in agreement with taking out the word educate, because we don't formally educate, but as educators, teachers, we do educate. For instance, if there's a case of bullying or child, and I've seen this in high school, making gender comments, making comments mocking somebody because they think, even using the word, oh, that's so gay, like that. It's up to us, educate, but we just don't do it formally unless it's within the scope of our self-education. So that's how I feel. I can live with just reading that one and just keeping everything, but I don't think any of this can be changed.
Madam Chair?
Thank you, yes.
Madam Chair, may I request a 2-minute recess so I can look something up really fast? I need to take a look at something.
All right, let's take a 2-minute recess, please.
On and on all weekend.
Maybe a bunch of my personal ones from
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
from the caucus, and I'm like, oh my God, every one of them. You know.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
And they're all planning on being here tomorrow.
Seriously.
Okay, let's resume the meeting, and hopefully, I want to apologize first to staff who have been sitting here very patiently to answer questions that we might have regarding the rest of the agenda, and we appreciate your patience. Okay, so, board members, we're going to make a decision now. Ms. Vaughn, are you with us?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to make a final proposal that we leave the agenda listed as it is and not read anything tomorrow night. That's my recommendation. Okay.
I hate to be a pain, but that violates our protocols. Our agreed upon protocols are that we read the ethnic and racial. You knew I was going to say that, Attorney Bruno. You had to have known I was going to say that. Those are our rules. Our rules that we have agreed upon as a board is that we read them aloud. That is not the issue. The reading aloud is not the issue. The issue is, how do these things get onto our agenda? Why did one board member put something on an agenda without the rest of us agreeing? What is the process? How do they get there? Those are the underlying issues. That's it. I won't say anything else.
Okay, this board member will respond about that. This school district has been working with Equality Florida Safe and Healthy Schools Project for several years. When I was invited to become a member of the school board advisory for them, because of the fact that I had met many of the people and attended some of the trainings that have been provided in this district, I honestly did not think about it. I know that they do have a political action committee, as does the NAACP, as is BUPAC, where you guys attend every week. So I don't know that that's an issue, but this is in regard to their Safe and Healthy Schools project. That is why I submitted it. I had not been of the practice in my tenure and 10 years on the board. The board office staff took care of creating that part of the agenda. So now this is a learned opportunity, and we will certainly workshop it and move forward with a protocol, which we do not have at this point. So I'm ready to take a vote and move on. Ms. Bruno, do you have a recommendation for the board?
So I believe that you made a recommendation. Let's see if the board would like to move forward with that, which is to not read anything and leave everything as is if we can get a consensus.
Okay, anyone in agreement with that?
To not read anything.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay. Ms. Giovanelli?
I can't support that at this time.
Okay.
Ms. Vaughn.
Ms. Vaughn?
No.
Okay, no. Mr. Pre-Bruno, as our attorney, would you provide another recommendation for us? Seems like we're at a stalemate here.
Another recommendation, given that all of the resolutions are to support unity and support anti-bullying and harassment, may I make a recommendation to the board that we keep and read the anti-bullying policy? I do understand that that is something that was not on the October 3rd minutes, but with the board's consensus, you can move forward with that. I think that encompasses everything that the board stands for, as well as Hispanic Heritage Month, which you advised the public that you would read last month. With regards to everything else, my recommendation would be to withdraw them.
Withdraw them? Okay, Ms. Matrika?
Can you add to that we put no other resolutions until the board makes a decision regarding process?
This is
In future meetings?
my recommendation would be that at one point the board all gets together and comes up with their process and picks all of their resolutions for the year.
That's what I mean. But for future meetings, we don't sit here and do this because we won't have resolutions on our agendas going forward until that conversation takes place and that process is in place.
And let me just clarify why I'm recommending the withdrawal. Just because I think these resolutions are motions that are significant motions that the board is making, and all of the board needs to be on the same page to be able to move forward with these types of action items. If the board is not on the same page and not in consensus with regards to these particular resolutions, then you really should not move forward with them. And the only other option that you would have is to do a consensus per resolution if there are others that you would like to keep on. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Attorney Bruno. Okay, all those in favor of Attorney Bruno's recommendation that we read the Anti-Bullying and Hispanic Heritage Month resolutions and withdraw all the others for the time being, please.
With explanation to the public that we had, yes.
For the time being.
Yes. Ms. Vaughn?
No.
Ms. Morgan, yes. Ms. Gittens?
With explanation, yes.
Ms. Jordan?
I just think, no, we've already put it out there. I have a problem with that.
Okay. Ms. Patrica? Yes. And Ms. Giovanelli, yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 noes. Okay. So we will read anti-bullying and Hispanic heritage, and we will withdraw all others temporarily.
I apologize, but I have to.
Yes, thank you, and I apologize that we... Dr. Adkins, do you want to continue with the agenda review?
Thank you. Next question, approval of Title IV Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant. Question is, if I recall correctly, the Department of Education approved the grant 2 years in a row, but we have not hired a director at this point. What are the plans to fill this position? And so I'm going to ask Dr. Spiro to respond.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dr. Spiro.
Currently, Lee Hughes, who's our coordinator for science, is the one who also works with our Title IV grant in conjunction with the directors of curriculum and instruction and director of grants as well. They do it together. We have not advertised that position at this point because as Ms. Kennedy came on, we began to look at restructuring a little bit at the grants department, and she and I are exploring the possibility of perhaps moving Title IV under the grants department where there could be additional oversight with that Title IV grant. And if we choose to do that, then we wouldn't need a director for that particular position, so we may relook at that one particular position. And so that's where we are currently right now. So they were just literally in conversations about that possibility moving forward.
Ms. Patrica?
So how does that work from like an auditing perspective? If the grant says that they're funding us 0.8 for a director and we don't have a director, do we just not use that money? Does that money stay on the table?
We can reclassify that money, put an amendment in.
And that would have to come before us for an approval?
Correct.
So I'm not clear on whether to me this is a lot of money. Is it 2.7 million?
I would have to look at the exact amount, I believe roughly, yes.
2.7 million, this is the second year in a row that we're approving it. We approved the job description. Why did we approve the job description at the beginning of the year? And then we're changing our minds now about whether we're going to fill the position.
And we're not changing our minds. We've been in conversation about this very particular position, the Title IV director. I think it was Title IV for and STEM programs is what it is. So we have been continuing to have those conversations as well because we're looking at precedent being set also. So once you write in a director for a particular grant, moving forward also, that sets a precedent. So budget's been part of this conversations with us also. And so we're just being very mindful of how we're using that money to make sure that what we're doing now is something that be replicated moving forward. So we are looking at what some of the other grants already have been in place and who oversees those particular grants and what supports they have to see if this mirrors that as well. And again, that was part of the transition when Terry came on. She and I had those conversations after she got herself settled in.
So are you essentially asking us to approve something tomorrow night that you have no intention of doing?
No, no, ma'am. I said the option leaves us there as well. I mean, so once this is approved, if we decide that this grant warrants to have the director based around our further conversations, then that is already approved and we're able to move forward with it. If we need to do an amendment for the Title IV, then certainly we would then make that amendment after that decision is made with a number of key people.
All right, going forward, I'd like more clarity as to what it is that I'm approving, because I see director position. To me, that means we're hiring a director. And again, this is 2 years in a row that we're not hiring a director. I don't know why that's in there. I'm finding myself saying this a lot today, but this doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why I'm approving a director position when you're telling me we're in the point we're reevaluating whether we even need a director position. So why am I approving it if you don't think you're going to need it? I'm not comfortable with that.
Anything else?
No, I understand.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Dr. Spiro, but I had a question too. So where is Title IV currently?
Title IV right now currently is with Mr. Lee Hughes, who also does science.
Okay, and did you say someone else was working with him?
He works with, his supervisors, the directors of curriculum and instruction, and then he also worked with Ms. Kennedy, the director of grants, when they were looking at the grant submittal.
Who was he working with before Ms. Kennedy came on?
With the directors of curriculum and instruction, so I believe it was Lori Houchin.
And so the reporting for the past 2 years has been included the explanation or the waiver that there wasn't a director position?
That Lee would have to answer that question. I don't know how we reported it.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, can I ask a question? I guess I'm confused now as to what are we approving? That you're not going to fill it, or?
We'll let Terry come up and talk to us.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's your fault.
That's exactly what, any idea what I'm approving?
The majority of the grants are submitted prior to coming here. There are a few grants, like the magnet grant, where we had to come to the board before submitting it. So Title IV grant has actually been submitted. It's not uncommon to make amendments. For example, in Title I, we had a coordinator position. We had 2 coordinator positions in Title I that were approved and were part of the plan, but we have not filled the one position. So we'll just do an amendment to make that change. So it is not uncommon to do an amendment. I was just looking at the report with entitlements and grants. We're over $100 million with all of those. And what we're trying to do is try to have some consistency with the various grants. And every grant has to have a director, or it's a director, administrator, a program manager, someone that oversees the grant. Many of those are positions where it's a coordinator. We have Title I with 0.25, which is that I'm under, but Title IV, Title II, there's a varied amount of work with each of them, and so we're just trying to have some conversation and some consistency on what that program director, manager, administrator is, because we use different terms on each of them.
So are we trying to approve, we've approved the grant, yes.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if you prefer, I mean, the grant has already been submitted. We could actually pull it if that's the preference and come back with it, with whatever the decision is on, because it's been submitted to DOE. After we submit, we bring them forward to you, just like the ESSER and the other grant that's here today, the GEARS grant.
So has this grant that we're talking about been submitted to us?
Yes, it has.
And it has been approved by us?
It has been approved by DOE.
Right, okay, so.
But not by the board.
But not by the board?
Not yet.
Okay, so you can understand the confusion, then why are we doing a portion of this, changing it at this point? and it
Correct.
hasn't been
We submitted, what was submitted to you is what was submitted to DOE. And we haven't made, just like with our other grants, we're having to make some changes. For example, the other grant that's listed today for gears, it's 750,000 or thereabouts, that is the district portion. We have something that was submitted to DOE on there for PPE that's not been approved. The student stations, it's not approved, so we're going back and rewriting the grant. We're actually rewriting multiple grants because of the equitable services, which means the private school allocation that we've been given. The law changed and now doesn't allow us to give it to the schools the way we did, so we have to go back and recalculate all of those. So there will be amendments coming for those as well.
So I hear what you're saying, that sometimes we get into a grant and we have to make changes and we have to submit amendments, and that's fine, but you're coming in front of me asking for my approval on something you're telling me you're going to change. Like, you have absolutely no intention of filling this position, and you want me to approve it anyways. Like, I know I should be directing these comments at Greg, but you guys are the ones, at Dr. Atkins, but you guys are the ones answering the questions, so it just feels inappropriate for me to approve something when you're basically standing here saying you're not gonna fill that position.
And I don't know that decision's been made, but if you're not comfortable with it, I don't see any reason why you couldn't pull it, because we've submitted to DOE, and then we could, in the next week, that could be determined and we could resubmit.
I just had a side conversation with Dr. Spiro, and just so you all know what the conversation was about, I wanted to make sure that we were able to pull this agenda item because I want to also be comfortable with it myself. Dr. Spiro and I usually go through these items, and we had it on our agenda to go through, and I was going to specifically talk about this one, and we actually got onto other stuff on our agenda, never got back to that. So if the board is all right, what I'd like to do is go ahead and pull this and then bring it back to you when this is done.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So in looking at the grant budget narrative, are all the other positions in here filled? And
No, there's a .5 of the new, is that Phil?
.5 resource seeker is not.
The new
Yeah.
.5.
There's a .5 resource teacher that's listed as new under staffing summary. That is not currently filled. That's being paired with an upcoming MOU with Ding Darling Wildlife Society, so that's why .5 is from the grant, and .5 would be an MOU with Ding Darling Wildlife. But the other positions are currently filled and partially funded by Title IV.
Okay. And are there plans for the travel parts, which I see in and out of county are quite
Correct, and
comprehensive?
DOE had similar concerns with travel because so much is going to a digital or virtual format. So what would happen there is there'd be a future budget amendment to transfer unused travel funds to a program such as EOS, which is Equal Opportunity Schools. And that's an implementation that we're starting this school year in our high schools that's also being funded through Title IV.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, next item is approval to remove items from the official property record. This has to do with explain an obsolete smart board. Mr. Alton's going to come up, but as the board, I'm sure you're aware that we are in the process of refreshing all of them with the Promethean boards across the district. And just something that I want to say positive, I think most of you were briefed by Mr. Davis regarding how he's moving this expenditure up in advance so we can actually get some of these things ordered. Not only the Chromebooks that we talked about, but he's moving the 5-year project on Promethean boards, really trying to condense that down to 3 years. So I think that's a very positive thing and allow us to get this new technology into our teachers' hands sooner rather than later. So, Mr. Alton?
You answered it exactly how I would have.
Okay.
We are, just replacing the smart boards with the next generation of technology, which are interactive panels. And of course, as we pull the smart boards out, we write those off and we resell them where we can. And if we cannot resell them, we dispose of them as we do any other electronic item.
Yeah, it was my question. So I was just wondering, I saw the value was only like 1,000 and something. And how successful are we at selling it maybe to even some charter schools or something that don't have the next generation that we have?
We're actually not very successful with sales, and even with some of our charters with donations. Unfortunately, the boards are considered older technology, and a lot of the organizations have moved on to either the next generation of board or to some sort of panel.
All right, and this, of course, is not one of those things where you can trade in the old and get some money towards the new.
No, unfortunately not. We really wish we could, but some of these things are, as you saw, the remaining value is very, very low because the majority of these boards, they live a long time. And so even though we probably depreciate them over 5 years, a lot of the boards that we have out there have been there 6, 7, 8 years that have stayed in service, so they don't really have a lot of trade-in value.
So that would be an excellent project for one of our Dunbar or one of our schools engineering to take one of those and figure out what can you glean from this to make money off of it when it's obsolete. But anyway, I digress. So.
Ms. Giovanelli had a question.
You have a...
Oh, Ms. Giovanelli, sorry.
Actually, so I know a nonprofit that had inquired about buying a smart board, so I can have them contact you directly to purchase one of those for $1,000?
I can't name the price. We have to auction it.
Okay.
But my guess is they will get it much below $1,000.
Oh, yeah, because, so I'll send the email to you, Dr. Atkins, and I've got to find it. It's an older one, but I know that they're still looking, and it's one of those nonprofits, some basketball. I can't remember the name of the nonprofit, but I know it's a group of basketball players that they wanted that for some educational purposes. Ted Tasong or something. It's his group, and I can't think of the name off the top of my head at the moment. But I'll look for that email. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, board members, next question is relative to, let's see, approval of the expenditure of furniture, classroom, office, and specialty. This is this furniture for schools? And I have
pick up the ball then.
Susan is going to answer that for us. Thank you.
You can sit there and just say yay or nay.
Good afternoon. Yes, schools and departments can both use this, and it has specialty equipment too, such as the risers on the stage and things like that.
And is this in replacing older, obsolete furniture, or?
So we issued a bid. This is the third year of the base year contract, and so we have about 15 vendors awarded. It's a very wide variety of furniture and equipment, and as each school needs new equipment and furniture, they use that to check what's available, emerging, So yes, as equipment ages, furniture ages, this is the intent for the bid.
And is it similar to the maintenance type thing where it, eventually ages out type thing? Or is it up to the school to say, we need some new furniture?
It's my understanding that each year schools are given a small amount of funds to replace, for example, student desks and chairs or teachers' desks as they wear out. And then periodically, we have 3 to 5 schools each year that get a refresh if it's been, I think it's about 15 to 20 years since they've had new furniture. So it's a variety. Sometimes it's a full replacement of a school that hasn't had new furniture in 15 to 20 years, and probably most heavily it's for on an as-needed basis to replace aged and damaged furniture.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next question is approval of the personnel recommendations. The question is, are there no administrative positions? Dr. Pruitt is in bargaining, so I'll answer. The answer to that question is no, not this particular agenda item. Next one is consent for operations. This is approval to pursue the purchase of a 2.2 acre parcel on Taylor Lane and Lehigh Acres for the purposes of expansion of G. Weaver Hips. Please update on the property between the bank and G. Weaver Hips. Is this on the list of properties in the CIP? And then please explain why we're purchasing this acreage. So, Dr. Savage.
Good afternoon. Those two questions kind of roll together. So the property is part of a district initiative to expand our pre-K offerings in Lehigh Acres. It's part of a federal grant that the district has applied for. As outlined in the CIP, the grant is targeting to pay for the planning, design, and construction of this facility. You can find the description on page 60 of the CIP, and that this is that property designed for the pre-K center. The property is currently in its due diligence phase, and the current estimated timeline to ratify the property purchase would be around the start of the new year.
And the building would be done for 21, 22?
I'm not 100% sure what the actual start date would be.
Okay, thank you. And
different enrollment. So pre-K is a little different. They enroll at different time periods than the regular school. They don't necessarily have to start in August, so it would depend on some other factors.
Anytime. And the other part was just about that parcel behind the bank, between the bank and G. Weaver.
That was the property. That's the piece that we were just talking about. That's this one. The second one was for the Buckingham Road Riverdale High one. That question was for the that was specifically for the G. Weaver.
I thought there were two pieces though by G. Weaver. In other words, as you're coming in from on the bus ramp side, that there was a piece on the left and a piece on the right as you go into the bus ramp.
My understanding is this is behind. I'm trying to get the configuration in my mind just because I've seen the aerials. It's kind of set off just back. It kind of is adjacent to the school property, and it kind of connects back behind that area.
And then there is another piece that's, if you know where they're building their athletic building, where they, the covered area, just to the side of that on Taylor Lane is another piece of property that they used as a field and all that. So I didn't know if that was up for sale.
I mean, this is just specific to this particular piece. I'd be happy to have our staff, look through it and point out any particular areas with you if there's anything more specific on that.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Sir, since there's like about 20 of them, you just want me to go through quickly to keep the approval to purchase the 2.2 acre parcel on Buckingham Road in Fort Myers for the purposes of renovation expansion at Riverdale High School. The question was, please give an update on schedule and priority of Riverdale updates. Our public community meetings advertised to include the whole community. The RFQ for the Riverdale project is being advertised, and the goal is for us to hire a design and construction team by spring of 2021. The community involvement will take place once the design team has been hired, so that the design team could be involved in that community process.
And what was that date again?
Spring of 2021 is when we're trying to have that design and construction team online through finishing that RFQ process.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. The second question on that item was, please explain why we are purchasing this acreage. So as outlined in the CIP, this campus is approved for a major campus master plan and refresh project. As part of this project, this acreage is needed to, 1, provide additional space for expanded bus capacity, and 2, space for a new building to house capacity currently being provided by portables. Now, sub-questions within that same item were, A, why is Trinity only involved in one purchase and not the other? And as part of their contract to provide our property assistance, Trinity works with staff on both of these efforts. As well as the question was, who is paying Trinity for this transaction, the buyer or the seller? And for both of the G. Weaver and the Riverdale properties, the seller is paying TCG.
Thank you.
My pleasure. The next item is the I-14, the approval of the 2020 to 2025 capital improvement plan. The question was, Does a vote for approval of this item on Tuesday in agreement with all items in perpetuity, what happens when changes are made? Are those changes brought back before the board before execution? All items, our response here is that all items in the CIP align with the approved budget. Any changes would be brought back to the board. As discussed throughout the development of the CIP, only year one projects are funded in the fiscal year 2020-21 budget. Any projects or budget allocations in years 2, 3, 4, and 5 are proposed and would have to be approved in future annual capital budgets.
You as a board only approve an annual expenditure. You don't approve multi-year expenditures.
Right. So on the CIP, though, everything that's listed on there, okay, so only the things that are for 20 up to 21
That's right.
is approved.
Right.
So if there are changes to that after we've approved the 2021 budget, does that, is that where the change order and all that comes in, or what? As if there are adjustments to that?
I would say it depends, but yes, by and large, we do bring back, if there's changes in expenditures that require board approval, we certainly do come back for those.
So it's not just a blanket, we did the budget and everything that goes with it is done and that's that?
It's kind of separate pieces here. Like, this is the document that's trying to give you both a clear picture of what we're trying to do in year one that's in the capital budget, to kind of flesh that out via pictures and descriptions. And the second part of that is really that year 2 through 5 view of what are we planning to do. So sometimes when people ask for a question that isn't funded in year one, at least you know it's coming in years 2 through 5. As it pertains to the normal business of the operation, this is just to try to give you, and all of us really, not just the board, but everyone, and kind of an opportunity of what's the 5-year glance of what we're trying to do.
But then even within the CIP, you have individual projects that come to the board for approval as individual projects. So there may be facilities listed in the CIP, but then each separate piece of that, like if we're building School K, that's something that's going to come to the board. And the expenditure for K would come to you as an annual expenditure. Now that expenditure, that construction project may go over more than 1 year, but those expenditures get approved annually.
For that year, okay.
Yeah, I don't want you to anticipate that just because you're approving this plan, that every individual expenditure estimate that's within that plan is somehow tethered to your approval of this time and effort. It's just to try to take that capital plan that you have approved for the year and make that come alive more. This is just a document to try to give you a little bit more detail and photos and things like that.
So it's basically just saying we are approving this document that everyone will be working on for the next 5 years, more hard and fast the first year.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, and years 2 and 3 are usually a little bit more, there may be multi-year construction projects. When you start to get to years 4 and 5, that's when things can change. But even years 2 and 3 can change, right. And you have that discretion. It does not bind you in any way that these projects are all, that you've given your consent, it can't be undone. And that's, I think that's what you're getting with the financial side of this as well, that you're not, this is just a document, a public-facing document,
okay,
if you will.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Now, there were specific questions within this item as well. One was location map should be labeled incorporated areas. We did thank you for catching the Scrivener's error. That's already been adjusted, and before I was walking up here, I was told that it's already been changed within the plan to address that clerical error. The second question here was, please update on the tech center in the East Zone. The property is currently being evaluated for potential East Zone Tech Center. There is no funding for the construction of the project presently in that current 5-year plan, because as I mentioned earlier, those things can change, can be fluid. Page 20, why is Babcock Ranch on the plan? This, just to answer that, the Babcock Ranch development extends into the northeast portion of Lee County, so that's a part of that to be addressed. Page 47, please update why we are purchasing property versus using existing or selling existing property first. To answer that, in accordance with the proximity project, we are seeking to ensure that new schools and additional capacity is constructed based on the location of current student enrollment needs and expected student growth. Now, we're in the process of evaluating the best locations for future school growth. As part of this evaluation, we look to purchase new properties in proximity to needed capacity, and we'll be looking to sell other property to help fund those purchases of land in areas where our students currently live and continue to show growth. Potential property sales purchases will be presented at our November board briefing as well, so you get more specific detail on that. Update on purchase and use of existing facilities, the example provided Milwaukee and Homestead. So as a function of the property valuation that I just described above, for example, the one that was cited, the Milwaukee Homestead cited, our planning team has assessed this building is not best suited to our needs based on factors such as the size of the facility, industrial versus commercial use, demands associated with the industrial use, i.e. like carport bays and things like that, transportation impacts, and price, among other considerations. But that's the type of evaluation that's going on, and we'll be happy to provide more information at our November briefing on the specific land in consideration. Question, page 66, are we still in discussions on separate K-8? So regarding the Old Lambs facility and the expansion of Veterans Park, we are currently looking at two options, to either reopen the facility as one expansive K-8 campus or two separate campuses. This will also be presented at the November briefing as to where we are currently. That process. Page 75, I would like to see this data only with public schools, not including charters. The answer to that one, I think that was Ms. Giovanelli. We can certainly have our staff provide that data.
That was my question.
Oh, it was yours, okay, yes, that we can certainly have staff go back and take that table and just remove the charters out of there, so.
And you can just send it to me, thank you.
Also, I think both of you noted that page 78 was missing, and that was actually just based on the board docs, the way that the PDF flows up in the board docs, it made it look like a blank page. If you actually download it, like using the Adobe, like it will be accessible, it actually shows up correctly. So I'm not sure what to attribute that to. I did it myself to see what that looked like, and others looked at it, and because they were opening up in Adobe, it came out correctly. It's just through the viewer, it just for some reason made it look blank.
Is it possible just to send me, I think it's 78, 79 with those numbers on it?
It's actually correct if you could see it in Adobe, in the Adobe application, it's correct. It just, for whatever reason, in the viewer and the board docs, it shows blank, but it's not blank.
So I have to download it?
Yeah, if you click on it, if you double click on it, or it'll say like open with Adobe, it'll show up as it will show up when people are able to access it from our website and so forth once it's approved.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure you all knew that it actually is correct.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Next.
And let me just ask one thing.
Absolutely.
On that, the data that's on those 2 pages, 70, I think it's 77 and 78 or whatever, how up to date are those? Have they been adjusted since the initial presentation of the CIP?
I would have to check and get back to you to find out when the specific date timestamp for that was. I think I just couldn't tell you each of those tables. I'd rather give you a 100% accurate answer. Yep.
You can get back to me.
Absolutely. Thank you. The next question was, where is the schedule as to prioritize? How are you prioritizing? So as discussed in the CIP, the projects were prioritized according to the board's goals, strategic priorities, and the superintendent's Big Five, as well as available resources projected by the finance department. The final plan as defined in the CIP is a result of all that prioritization work. Gateway High School, New School, 48, 42, 925 on page 40, column 1. Is this the balance from what was already funded or what is still to be funded? The answer to that is this is the budgeted final amount for the project. So that's what's remaining in that project, and it has already been budgeted from previous plans. And the last question I have is the Veterans Park K-8 expansion. What is the current enrollment? And with new school expansion, what is the projected enrollment? Well, the capacity for Veterans Park is 1,708 students as a K-8. Now, if you were to make that entire facility in elementary, for example, just as it changes the ratios and whatnot, it would actually go up to a 1,898 elementary school. The capacity without portables at the Old Lambs Middle facility is 1,060. For a total of 2,768 students. Current enrollment at the two campuses is 3,041, and that's utilizing the current portables that are present. If the school became two separate campuses, the total capacity would be 2,958 students. So that would be our target enrollment. But again, this will be provided in better detail with opportunity for you to ask questions and such in November to talk about these options and so forth. Those are all the questions that I had, sir.
What kind of deadlines are there to make those decisions like that?
Well, some of them are coming up relatively soon. There are some things that are just pretty timed. They're key dependencies, specifically as it pertains to like student enrollment. So our batch process in terms of student assignment is pretty significant. That creates some. From a construction standpoint, we have a little bit more latitude. But in terms of that enrollment piece, there are some decisions that have to be made relatively soon. So that is, it's coming up. That's why we're bringing these things to the November meeting.
And one last thing that I didn't have it on here, and the update on the additions at the new labs. I know we had talked about that, and it was, you guys are supposed to be meeting on it or whatever.
Absolutely.
And if you need to talk to me offline, that's fine.
Sure. Yeah, that would probably be for the best. We're continuing to look at all the options. We just presented a comprehensive presentation relating to all the different ways that we, over the next 10 years, would like to address the capacity needs that we have really in the entire district, but specifically the East Zone is an area of considerable concern to us as we evaluate based on the Davis demographics data. You know, while we're still heavily involved in boundary scenarios and things along those lines, it's very clear to see that there's a lot of need out in the East Zone, and we just want to maximize over the next 10 years to do the very best possible job we can of making sure we have schools where we have kids and just to provide that type of capacity. So thank you for that question.
Ms. Patrica.
Just teasing. This is one of the things I'm most excited to approve in a long time, just so you know. I'm really excited with the thought and the time that went into this and the removal of any perception of favoritism or any of that. I feel like we asked you to do something and you gave us exactly what we asked for. So thank you. I appreciate your work on this.
I really appreciate you saying that. It's been one of the hardest parts of my job, honestly, is that there's so many needs out there. Folks want everything fixed in all their buildings. People want all the new schools everywhere, tech centers, even superintendents. They want those tech centers yesterday. But there's only so many dollars, and it becomes very hard when you have to make those tough decisions. And so having a transparent process that really takes into consideration the strategic plan, the big five, your board priorities, hopefully, you know, the first year is a big lift to get this off the ground, but hopefully future years will show that this will pay dividends as we make edits and tweaks and so forth. So I really appreciate your support as a board on this effort. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, I'd like that tech center tomorrow as well, but Dr. Atkins and I had this conversation last week, didn't we? Can we expand or convert existing high school classrooms to accommodate more career in tech ed? And the answer that I got from him was yes. So you're right, we need to prioritize. How can we make the most of what we have? Anyways, I'm appreciative.
Absolutely.
I'm
Thank
excited
you.
to vote yes on this. I wish it wasn't part of the consent agenda, so we could do it separately and be like, yay, celebrate.
Thank you.
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Savage.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. And at this time, finished with the agenda review, we'll move on for good of the order. Ms. Vaughn?
I have nothing at this time.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
She has nothing.
I have nothing at this time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gittens.
No, no. I guess she really didn't have anything.
Ms. Giovanelli?
I have none, thank you.
And I have none. Our next meetings will be tomorrow. We have a school board workshop
You
at 1.
have something I need to share with the board, and I don't know if
I'm
Mrs.
sorry,
Craig
Dr.
Bruno.
Atkins.
I don't know if you have anything.
Yes. Attorney Bruno?
I don't think I have anything, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
know I don't have anything, thank you.
Dr. Atkins?
I just want to make the board aware, we will be bringing a good cause item forward tomorrow evening, approval of the memorandum of understanding with United Way of Lee, Henry, Glades, and Okeechobee counties Adam Malloy's up. I'm going to bring him up to give you a brief synopsis on why we're doing this at this time.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your time. I'll try to keep it brief. So we're entering in this partnership with United Way to provide CARES funding to eligible child care providers, identifying Tier 2 and Tier 3 schools with before and after school programs. The funding will be awarded with a cap of $2,500. So any student family that's had a negative impact from COVID can apply, and we met with the principals last week to go over the process with the United Way.
And what will it be used for?
Before and after care programs.
Oh, okay.
And this was something that came to us, just came to us, and they moved as quickly as they can. We wanted to make sure that it was on as soon as we could get it to the board. This is why it's good calls.
Thank you. And Mr. Malloy, thank you for your work with the community. You're doing a great job. Thank you. Okay. Our next meetings are tomorrow. We have an attorney-client session at 11 a.m., a workshop at 1 p.m., and our school board action meeting at 6 p.m. Seeing no other business to come before this board, this meeting is adjourned. Everyone get home safe. And thank you for your patience.
Thank you.